Chapter 654. Qin Feiyang suddenly raised his head and looked at Mo Wuxian and the other two. Mo Wuxian laughed. Qin Feiyang, as long as you kneel down and beg me, I will let you go and let you reach the other side. Qin Feiyang laughed and said, You think you are qualified to make me kneel? He could not do such a thing that hurt his self-esteem. Moreover, even if he really knelt down, Mo Wuxian would not let him go. Stubborn. Mo Wuxian shook his head, and with a clang, a blood blade appeared above his head, emitting a shocking sharpness. At the same time, the two also raised their arms, battle chi surging at their fingertips, and a terrifying aura spread out. Qin Feiyang looked at the two and frowned. I have no enmity with you. Why do you want to help Mo Wuxian deal with me? Yes, there is indeed no enmity between us, but we have always liked to kill geniuses. I heard that you, Qin Feiyang, are not only talented in cultivation, but also in alchemy, so killing you personally will definitely be very satisfying. The two laughed. Aren't you afraid of going for wool and coming home shorn? Qin Feiyang's eyes turned cold. These two were not only vain but also self-righteous. You are now a fish on the chopping board at our mercy, do you know that? The two of them chuckled, their expressions full of disdain. What about your companions? Qin Feiyang pointed at Yan Tianfeng and the others. If Mo Wuxian and the other two really made a move at this moment, these people would definitely suffer. But just as he finished asking, Qin Feiyang laughed at himself. Back in the Spirit Cloud Mountain, Yan Tianfeng and Pan Wuyan joined forces to kill Mo Wuxian, and Mo Wuxian had long held a grudge in his heart. So why would he care about Yan Tianfeng's life? Even if he was not here today, Mo Wuxian would not let Yan Tianfeng reach the other side. As for the two, although he did not know much about them, from the previous conversation, he could already tell that the two were selfish people. In short, in their eyes they only cared about themselves, and everyone else was a pawn cannon fodder. True enough. Hearing what Qin Feiyang said, the three of them all had smiles on their faces. Evidently they were mocking Qin Feiyang. You guys are really ruthless. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Alas, could it be that you understand that those who achieve great things have to be ruthless? For someone as naive and childish as you, no matter how talented you are, it will be difficult for you to achieve great things. The golden-haired young man sighed, feeling rather regretful. Qin Feiyang glanced at the three of them, his eyes filled with disgust. In fact, the reason he said so much nonsense was to stall for time, because it was just as Mo Wuxian and the other two had said, he couldn't move freely on the small boat. Of course, if Mo Wuxian was alone he wouldn't have cared. Even if Mo Wuxian was a 2-star battle master now, with his methods he could easily kill him. However, the auras emitted by the blonde and green-haired youth were comparable to Lu Xingqian. It could be seen that they were both 3-star war masters, 2 3-star war sect teaming up. In addition to Mo Wuxian, this was a bit unbearable. However, the most important thing was still Ren Wuxuang. He didn't care about Lu Xingqian and Dong Zhengyang. He also didn't care about the lives of Ling Yu and the other three. However, he couldn't ignore Ren Wuxuang. Ren Wuxuang hadn't woken up yet. Once they started fighting he would definitely suffer. Glancing at Ren Wuxuang, Qin Feiyang still wanted to stall for time, but the three of them didn't give him a chance. To be exact, the three of them had seen through his goal. After all, the three of them weren't stupid. Boom! The 3 great battle arts attacked. This place was instantly filled with surging waves. Qin Feiyang and the others' boat was violently shaking in the bloody waves, as if it could be submerged at any time. What should we do? Qin Feiyang's eyes flickered. Abruptly, he gritted his teeth and activated the battle art. He raised his hand and waved it in the air. An invisible force roared out and pounced towards the 3 great battle arts. Boom! The invisible force collided with the 3 great battle arts in the air, and a terrifying destructive wave was suddenly born. Qin Feiyang's body trembled, and he immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. Although he was severely injured, he was able to withstand it with the protection of the battle art. However, the bloody waves on the sea were even more turbulent, reaching a height of more than 10 meters. This was the problem that Qin Feiyang was worried about. Once they fought with all their strength, Even if they weren't killed by Mo Wuxian and the other two, they would be swallowed by the bloody waves and fall into a sea of suffering. However, Mo Wuxian and the other two didn't have to worry about this, because no matter how high the bloody waves were, they just had to retreat to a higher place on the stone stairs. On the sea, the bloody waves covered the sky and pounced towards Qin Feiyang and the others. If they couldn't think of a way, even the gods wouldn't be able to save them. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang had a plan in his mind. However, this plan was really risky. It could even be said that there was a slim chance of survival. But now, it seemed that there was no other choice but to gamble. Whoosh! Without the slightest hesitation, Qin Feiyang leaped and actually landed on Run Wushuang's small boat. Seeing this, Mo Wuxian and the other two were stunned. Was this guy crazy? Didn't he know that he was digging his own grave? Because the stone tablet clearly recorded that the boat could only carry one person. If there was one more person, the boat would immediately sink to the bottom of the sea. And this point was immediately confirmed. When Qin Feiyang landed on the boat immediately sank to the bottom of the sea. Moreover, Qin Feiyang's own boat also turned around and floated away. In other words, he had no way out now. He could either find a way to reach the shore or fall into the sea of suffering. The former was obviously impossible, because Mo Wuxian and the other two wouldn't allow him to reach the shore. Moreover, even if the three of them didn't stop him, Qin Feiyang couldn't reach the shore without being able to fly. Therefore, only the latter was left, falling into the sea of suffering. But at this time, Qin Feiyang didn't panic at all. He waved his hand and directly sent Ren Wushuang to the castle. Then without hesitation, he jumped onto Dong Xingyang's boat and sent Dong Xingyang to the castle. Stupid! The blonde youth sneered. In order to save others, he didn't care about his own safety. How stupid! There's no other way. He's such a stupid person. Mo Wuxian shook his head and smiled. But this is good too. We don't have to do anything. He will fall into the sea of suffering himself. The green-haired youth smiled. In the blink of an eye, just as the three of them were talking, Qin Feiyang saved Lu Xingqian, and then looked at Zhao Yu and the other three. Since there was no way out, he might as well save them all. He jumped onto the four people's boats and sent them to the castle. After saving the four people, he stopped. The boat under his feet was sinking rapidly. He didn't save Yin Tianfeng and the others because their life and death had nothing to do with him. He looked up at Mo Wuxian and the other two. Mo Wuxian smiled and said, "You are only one step away from reaching the other shore. Are you unwilling now?" "Yes, I can't accept it." Qin Feiyang didn't deny it. Falling into the sea of suffering was a foregone conclusion. He didn't have the slightest confidence that he could escape alive. Maybe, in the end, he would become an emotionless blood puppet. Or maybe, he would be trapped in the castle and never be able to return to the capital and see his mother. I understand. If it were me, I would have gone crazy. But this kind of thing will never happen to me. In your next life, remember to open your eyes. Don't provoke people you can't afford to provoke. Mo Wuxian laughed and looked down at Qin Feiyang with the attitude of a victor. I will remember. Please remember too. Qin Feiyang's eyes narrowed slightly. A cold glint burst forth from his eyes. Then he went to the ancient castle. Splash. The boat also sank to the bottom of the sea. And Yin Tianfeng and the others from Quanzhou and Changzhou were all swallowed by the blood waves. When the sea returned to calm, the blonde youth retracted his gaze and turned to Mo Wuxian and said, "Are you happy now?" "Yes. Thank you. But, forgive me for being blunt, but by helping me you are actually helping yourselves. Because with Qin Feiyang's talent, if he enters the capital, he will definitely pose a great threat to you." Mo Wuxian laughed. "Do I need you to say that? If not for this, would we attack him? Do you really think we are giving you face? Naive." The two looked at Mo Wuxian mockingly, and then looked up at Tan Wu on the stone stairs. Their eyes flashed coldly. It's time to deal with that trash. The two stepped forward and chased after Tan Wu. Who is the naive one? Let's wait and see. Mo Wuxian laughed coldly and quickly followed. What a pity to die like this. At the same time, Tan Wu also looked down at the sea, his eyes full of regret. If Qin Feiyang did not die, He would definitely become a great person in the future. Unfortunately, he died prematurely. Then, he looked at Emma Wuxian and the other two again. Murderous intent flashed in his eyes, and then he continued to climb to the top of the stone stairs. At the same time, the ancient castle turned into a speck of dust and kept sinking to the bottom of the sea of bitterness. And the ancient castle fell into a dead silence at this moment. Whether it was Fatso and the rest or Qin Feiyang, they all had their heads lowered and their expressions were extremely ugly. Where is this? Suddenly, a confused murmur sounded, breaking the silence here. Qin Feiyang looked up and saw Ling Yu looking at the ancient castle suspiciously. And Lu Xingqian, Dong Xingyang, Ren Wushuang and the other three also woke up one after another. Lu Xingqian looked around and frowned. Brother Qin, what's going on? Why are we in your ancient castle? Ancient castle? Ling Yu and the other three were surprised. Qin Feiyang said, Unfortunately, we are now in the sea of bitterness. What? The few of them suddenly changed color. Qin Feiyang gave a simple and clear account of what had happened earlier. Ling Yu immediately clenched his hands and gritted his teeth. Those three damn bastards. I will never forgive them. Is there any use in saying tough words now? Dong Zhengyang glanced at him impatiently and said, The most important thing now is to think of a way to leave the sea of bitterness. The few of them lowered their heads and frowned, deep in thought. Lu Xingqian glanced at the few of them and said to Qin Feiyang telepathically, Brother Qin, I haven't paid back the favor I owed you before, and now I owe you another one. When do you think I will be able to pay it back completely? There was a faint smile on his face, as if he was not very worried about the current situation. Then don't pay it back, Qin Feiyang said. How can that be? What I hate the most is to owe others, especially you, Qin Feiyang. Chapter 655. Qin Feiyang looked at Lu Xingqian and frowned slightly. What was this person trying to say? Suddenly, he noticed the smile on Lu Xingqian's face and said, Do you have a way to leave Bitter Sea? Lu Xingqian pondered for a moment and nodded. There is indeed a way. Qin Feiyang's eyes lit up. Lu Xingqian said, But I have a condition. A condition? Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. If I didn't save you, you would have become a blood puppet. Don't you think it's a bit excessive to talk about conditions with me now? That's a different matter. I will slowly repay you for saving my life in the future, Lu Xingqian said. Qin Feiyang said angrily, You're hitting me when I'm down. No. Lu Xingqian shook his head and smiled. I'm negotiating with you. There's no threat. Even if you don't agree in the end, I will still take you out of Bitter Sea. But I have no obligation to help Wolf King and Fatso. Hearing this, Qin Feiyang was furious to the extreme. This was not a threat? Even an idiot would be able to tell. Qin Feiyang suppressed his anger and said in a deep voice, Tell me what condition? Lu Xingqian said, After entering the imperial capital, I need you to do something for me. As for what it is, I will tell you when the time comes. Qin Feiyang frowned. How could he agree so easily if it was so vague? Lu Xingqian looked at Qin Feiyang's expression and knew what Qin Feiyang was worried about. He said, Don't worry, I won't let you do anything outrageous. Qin Feiyang gritted his teeth and nodded. Okay, as long as it's not outrageous, I can agree. Lu Xingqian laughed. Brother Qin is indeed a straightforward person. Boss, you and Lu Xingqian are exchanging flirtatious glances. Are you secretly plotting some shady business? Fatso had been paying attention to them for a long time. Too much nonsense. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at him. He looked at Lu Xingqian and said, If you continue to dawdle, Emma Wuxian and the others might reach the top. We have to get rid of these three. Lu Xingqian's eyes flashed. With a wave of his hand, a mysterious force immediately enveloped Qin Feiyang. The next moment, Qin Feiyang felt his body lighten as he appeared in an unfamiliar place. He looked around suspiciously. This was a completely sealed secret chamber. It was about 1,000 feet wide, but there was nothing in this vast space. Qin Feiyang asked, Could this be your spatial divine object? Yes. Lu Xingqian nodded. Qin Feiyang asked suspiciously, What about the king crocodile? Lu Xingqian said, It's outside the secret chamber. What? Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled. he said in surprise. You mean your spatial divine object has more than one space? Yes. The space outside is much bigger than this. Lu Xingchen laughed. Qin Feiyang was surprised. Lu Xingchen shook his head and laughed. Don't even think about it. I won't take you there. Why? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. There are some secrets in that space that you can't know. Lu Xingchen smiled mysteriously. Secrets? Qin Feiyang was a little confused. What secrets could he not know? Don't think about it. You'll never know until you see it with your own eyes. Lu Xingchen laughed and waved his hand. The void in front of him suddenly shook. Immediately after, under Qin Feiyang's surprised gaze, an image appeared in the void. In the image, there was a sea of blood with undercurrents. My spatial divine object can not only see the outside situation, but also control it to go to heaven and earth. Lu Xingchen explained. Go to heaven and earth. Qin Feiyang suddenly felt incredulous. In fact, as far as I know, every spatial divine object can do these two things. But the strange thing is, why can't your spatial divine object? Lu Xingchen looked at him in confusion. I don't know either. Qin Feiyang's eyes were full of confusion. Could it be that the ancient castle was of a lower grade than Lu Xingchen's spatial divine object? He shook his head, no longer thinking about these boring questions, and said, Let's go. Even if the ancient castle was the lowest grade spatial divine object, he would cherish it like his life, because it was left to him by Uncle Yuan. Lu Xingchen immediately controlled the spatial divine object and swept towards the sea. Although Qin Feiyang could not sense anything in the secret room, from the image in the void, he could see that the spatial divine object was indeed moving. About 30 breaths of time, the surface of the sea of bitterness appeared in the image in front of them. In other words, the spatial divine object had now left the deep sea and was floating on the surface of the sea. Lu Xingchen waved his hand, and 3 more images appeared around them. As a result, they were able to see everything that was happening around them. The stone staircase was in one of the images. Lu Xingchen immediately controlled the spatial divine object and rushed towards the stone staircase. After approaching the stone staircase, he grabbed Qin Feiyang and instantly left the spatial divine object and landed on the first step of the stone staircase. Lu Xingchen smiled and said, Very easy, right? Indeed. Qin Feiyang nodded and looked up at the top of the stone staircase. Mo Wuxian and the other 2 had already climbed 1/3 of the way up. As for Tan Wu, he had already climbed 2/3 of the way up. Lu Xingchen pointed to the sea in front of them and said with a smile, Look, Wan Qiu and the others are also here. Qin Feiyang looked over, and indeed saw 4 small boats on the sea 300 to 400 meters away. No. Weren't there 5 of them? Why were there only 4 small boats? Qin Feiyang looked carefully and found that Feng Huo was missing from the 5. It seemed that this person had also died on the way. For a moment, Qin Feiyang could not help but feel sad. How many young talents had died in this place? Was it worth it just to enter the imperial capital? Lu Xingchen patted his shoulder and said with a smile, Everyone has their own fate, don't add to your sorrow. Quickly take back your ancient castle and chase after Mo Wuxian and the others. Take back the ancient castle? Qin Feiyang was taken aback and asked suspiciously, What do you mean? Lu Xingchen said, Your ancient castle is still at the bottom of the sea. What? Qin Feiyang was surprised. If you had directly entered my spatial divine object, then the ancient castle would definitely not have been separated from you. But just now, you entered my spatial divine object from inside the ancient castle. The ancient castle that is exposed outside is naturally still at the bottom of the sea. Lu Xingchen laughed. Qin Feiyang was suddenly enlightened. He carefully sensed that the ancient castle really wasn't in his body. Then, his mind moved slightly. Not long after, a circle of imperceptible ripples appeared on the calm surface of the sea. Qin Feiyang thought again, and a palm-sized ancient castle suddenly appeared in the void in front of him, emitting a mysterious aura. When Lu Xingchen saw the true appearance of the ancient castle, his pupils shrank slightly, and he said with a sound transmission, Brother Qin, your ancient castle is not an ordinary object. How do you know? Qin Feiyang was puzzled. I don't know either, maybe it's a kind of intuition. Or maybe it's because of the aura it emits. Lu Xingqian said. Qin Feiyang looked at the ancient castle, and also felt that the ancient castle was covered with a mysterious veil, making it difficult for people to see through it. Maybe it really is not an ordinary object. Qin Feiyang muttered, and kept the ancient castle into his glabella. Then, the two of them chased after Emma Wuxian and the other two, their eyes becoming incomparably sharp. But suddenly, Lu Xingqian stopped, and said with a sound transmission, "Do you want to learn from Emma Wuxian and let Wan Qiu and the others be buried in the sea of bitterness? Is that necessary?" Qin Feiyang asked. Lu Xingqian was stunned, and shook his head with a smile. Indeed, there is no need. With their current overall strength, to deal with Wan Qiu and the others, there was no need to use such despicable means. Emma Wuxian, aren't you going to wait for us? The two of them continued to rush up, and at the same time, Lu Xingqian shouted loudly. And Emma Wuxian was stunned. This voice seemed a little familiar. He stopped, looked down, and his face suddenly changed and exclaimed, "How is this possible? What's the fuss about?" The golden-haired youth frowned, and also looked down at Qin Feiyang and the other two, their faces full of disbelief. They didn't die? Did they see a ghost? The two of them rubbed their eyes hard, and looked at Qin Feiyang and the other two again. They really didn't die. In their hearts, stormy waves were immediately set off. They fell into the sea of bitterness and didn't die. How did they do it? At the same time, Tan Wu, who was at the top, also stopped moving forward, and looked at Qin Feiyang and the other two in surprise. Suddenly, the golden-haired youth asked, "Emma Wuxian, do they have any special treasures on them?" "Special treasures?" Emma Wuxian frowned and said, "I only know that Qin Feiyang has a space divine item that can hide in, and a dagger that can cut iron like mud. As for the other person, I don't know much. I think they were able to escape from the Sea of Bitterness because of Qin Feiyang's space divine item, or that dagger." The golden-haired youth's eyes were bright and full of greed. Emma Wuxian said in surprise, "What do you mean?" "Kill and steal." The golden-haired youth said word by word, with a piercing murderous intent. "No. Didn't you see the person beside Qin Feiyang? His aura is as strong as yours. I'm afraid if they fight, it will be a lose-lose situation. And Qin Feiyang's methods are also quite impressive. He's not easy to deal with." Emma Wuxian shook his head, his eyes full of worry. Previously, when they made a move against Qin Feiyang, it was because they had the advantage of time, place, and people. But now that Qin Feiyang had already come ashore, their advantage had disappeared. It would not be easy to deal with Qin Feiyang again. Lose-lose. Are you joking? So what if that person is a 3-star war sect? We have 2 3-star war sects here. Could it be that we can't beat him alone? As for Qin Feiyang, a mere 1-star war sect is nothing to worry about. If you're afraid, then scram. In any case, after we kill them, you won't be able to get anything," the golden-haired youth said with contempt. "Arrogant idiot, sooner or later you'll lose your life." Emma Wuxian secretly sneered and nodded. "All right, then I wish you good luck." With that, he turned around and ran up the stairs without looking back. The green-haired youth looked at Emma Wuxian and said disdainfully, "What a cowardly and incompetent trash." The golden-haired youth shook his head. "This kind of person, even if he enters the imperial capital, he won't be able to do anything." Following that, the two of them stood on the steps with their arms crossed, looking down at Qin Feiyang and Lu Xingqian. That arrogant attitude, that contemptuous gaze. It was as if they were waiting for their prey. But who was the prey? Chapter 656. At the same time, on the surface of the sea, Feng Wuxia and the other 3 stood on the boat and looked at the words Paramitha on the stone tablet with ecstasy on their faces. Suddenly, Feng Wuxia noticed Qin Feiyang and Lu Xingqian on the stone stairs and said in a deep voice, "As expected, they have already reached the other shore." Wan Qiu and the other 2 immediately raised their heads and looked at Qin Feiyang and Lu Xingqian with a cold glint in their eyes. Feng Hua is such a good person, but he died on the bridge of helplessness, and this bastard is still alive and well. It's really unfair. This confirms the saying that good people don't live long, but bad people live for 1,000 years. The two sisters gritted their teeth and felt indignant. Wuxia sighed. In this world, there is no such thing as good and bad people, only the strong and the weak. Wuxia nodded. As long as one's fist was strong enough, no one would dare to say anything even if one did something outrageous. There would even be people who admired and followed you, because you were strong enough. Suddenly, the four of them noticed the two blonde young men. Wuxia said, "They are from Quanzhou and Changzhou." Wuxia looked at the two blonde young men, then at Qin Feiyang and Lu Xingqian. The atmosphere is a little strange. Strange. Wuxia and the twins were stunned. They looked carefully and indeed found a clue. Wuxia's eyes flashed and he looked away. Ignore them, let's go ashore first. The four of them drove the boat and quickly broke through the blood puppet's encirclement and entered the forbidden area. There was no suspense. The four of them immediately stopped and were confused by all kinds of illusions. On the stone stairs, Qin Feiyang and Lu Xingqian had also arrived below the two blonde young men, less than 10 meters away. Don't you have many companions? Why don't I see them? The green-haired young man looked at the two of them suspiciously. Do you still need to ask? They must be dead. The blonde young man laughed. Look at my brain. I even forgot about this. I'm really muddle-headed. The green-haired youth slapped his forehead angrily. He looked at Qin Feiyang and smiled. You were trapped in a sea of bitterness with a narrow chance of survival. The fact that you were able to escape is already a blessing from the heavens. Qin Feiyang grinned and said, Then I wonder if you have accumulated any good karma in your previous lives? What do you mean? The two of them raised their eyebrows. Lu Xingqian smiled and asked, What do you think? We? The two looked at each other and smiled. The golden-haired young man looked at Qin Feiyang and said, I don't want to talk nonsense with you. Immediately hand over the treasure and dagger you're hiding. Ugh. Qin Feiyang was astonished. He was actually thinking about the castle and Chang Shui. The arrogance of these two people far exceeded his imagination. Qin Feiyang crossed his arms and said playfully, What if I don't hand it over? You're not handing it over? Humph. If you don't hand it over today, don't think about leaving the 9 underworlds. The two of them sneered. So arrogant? Lu Xingqian raised his eyebrows and said indifferently, Say it. Do you want to fight one-on-one or together? One-on-one? Do you think we have time to waste on you? The two of them smiled disdainfully. Lu Xingqian said, So you want to fight together? The golden-haired young man smiled and said, The two of us like to beat up rookies like you. Qin Feiyang and Lu Xingqian looked at each other with a smile in their eyes. Qin Feiyang looked at the two of them again and asked seriously, Do you really like to fight in groups? You don't agree? The two of them were full of arrogance. Yes, of course. Since you like it, I must fulfill your wish. Qin Feiyang smiled brightly, but Lu Xingqian smiled even brighter than him. Was there something wrong with their heads? Were they looking for a beating? Looking at the smiles on their faces, the golden-haired young man and the green-haired young man felt inexplicably flustered. But when they thought of their own strength, their arrogance came back. The golden-haired young man said, My patience is limited. Don't play dumb with me anymore. All right then. I officially announced the start of the dog abuse event. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and one figure after another appeared beside him. There was Fatso, Wolf King, and the Black Dragon Snake. There was also Ren Wushuang, Xinmei Dongjingyang, Dongfang Wuhan, and Murong Xiong. Of course. There were also the 4 of them. How is this possible? They're actually not dead. The golden-haired young man and the green-haired young man's expressions changed. Qin Feiyang looked at the crowd and smiled. Everyone, you heard what they said just now, right? Do you know what to do? Of course. The Wolf King chuckled. Immediately, Wolf King and Fatso rubbed their fists and walked towards the two of them. Damn it, let's go. The golden-haired young man shouted. The two of them immediately turned around and fled upwards without looking back. Chase. Wolf King waved his claws and instantly transformed into a muscular wolf, chasing after the two of them. Aya, why are you running? Weren't you very arrogant just now? Why are you running away with your tail between your legs now? Fatso followed closely behind, his face full of ridicule. The two of them were furious in their hearts. Since he was still alive, what was the point of hiding? Wasn't it obvious that he was trying to trick others? Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "Let's go, we'll follow them. Such a wonderful show, we can't miss it." Lu Xingqian chuckled. Everyone laughed and followed behind Qin Feiyang and Lu Xingqian, surging upwards in a mighty manner. At the same time, hearing the movement below, Mo Wuxian looked down in bewilderment, and his expression immediately changed. So many people, such a terrifying lineup. Were they trying to scare people to death? Whoosh. Now he didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly rushed towards the peak, even using all his strength. Because he knew that after Qin Feiyang and the others dealt with the golden-haired young man and the other two, they would definitely not let him go. At this moment, Tan Wu had already reached the peak. In front of him was a square about 10,000 feet wide, located at the top of the clouds, surrounded by clouds and mist, covered with a layer of mysterious color. And in the center of the square, there were 9 blood-colored altars neatly arranged, exuding an ancient aura. In front of each altar, there was a stone tablet, engraved with the names of the 9 provinces. Obviously, this was the passage to the outside. In other words, as long as the altar was activated, one would be able to leave the 9 nether yellow springs. Tan Wu looked at the altar that led to He province, his eyes flickering. Finally, he actually turned around and walked to the stone stairs, lowering his head to glance at Qin Feiyang and the others, as if he didn't intend to leave. On the sea, Wan Qiu was the first to wake up from the illusion. But when he reached the other side, he didn't immediately chase after Qin Feiyang and the others. Instead, he stood on the stone stairs, waiting for Feng Wuxia and the others. In fact, he was afraid. The lineup on Qin Feiyang's side was too terrifying, and unless it was a last resort, he couldn't face them head-on. 2 little brats, don't run if you have guts. Yeah, it's so tiring, stop, Fat Lord promises not to hit you. On the stone stairs, Fatso and Wolf King kept hooting. The golden-haired young man and the other 2 fled desperately, looking extremely embarrassed. Looking at this scene, Qin Feiyang and the others also had smiles on their faces. Zhao Yu smiled and said, "There's a saying that is right, mountains and rivers turn, and the one who laughs last is the real winner." Qin Feiyang said, "So it's better to keep a low profile." Low profile? Zhao Yu was stunned and then rolled his eyes. He really couldn't tell how Qin Feiyang was low profile. Ling Yu also looked at Qin Feiyang speechlessly and said, "Wolf King and Fatso probably won't be able to catch up. I'll go stop them." Although Wolf King had the perfect auxiliary battle technique, air escape steps, his cultivation was only a 2-star battle grandmaster. And although the golden-haired young man and the other 2 only had superior auxiliary battle techniques, they were both 3-star battle grandmasters. So in terms of speed, the 2 sides were equal. So no matter how Wolf King and Fatso chased, they couldn't catch up. No need. Qin Feiyang waved his hand. Ling Yu frowned. What did he mean? Didn't he want to kill the 2 of them? Qin Feiyang said, "Killing them now is not enough to make them completely despair." Ling Yu and the others looked at each other. What was this guy planning? Lu Xingqian pondered for a while and understood. He gave Qin Feiyang a thumbs up and said, "You also plan to deal with Dongfang Wuhan and Murong Xiong like this?" "Of course," Qin Feiyang replied. Lu Xingqian glanced at Dongfang Wuxian and Murong Xiong from the corner of his eyes, and the corner of his mouth pursed into a meaningful smile. At the same time, Dongfang Wuhan and Murong Xiong were also secretly talking. Murong Xiong sighed. "I didn't expect us to really come to the other side." "Yeah, now we're just waiting to enter the capital." Dongfang Wuhan was also very excited. Murong Xiong asked, "What about Qin Feiyang?" Humph. Although we only reached the other side with his help, it doesn't mean that I have to be grateful to him. When we leave this place, I will let him know who the real winner is." Dongfang Wuhan sneered secretly. "Yes. We can't let him ride on our heads again." Murong Xiong nodded. "He won't. The #1 alchemist in the inner palace can only be me." Dongfang Wuhan's eyes flashed with a wisp of cold light. Time passed breath by breath. Mo Wuxian, who was in front, had finally climbed to the top. When he saw the 9 altars, He was immediately overjoyed and immediately rushed toward the altars. Swish. However, at this moment, Tan Wu stood in front of him. Mo Wuxian was slightly taken aback and said angrily, Tan Wu, what are you doing? What am I doing? Isn't it obvious? Tan Wu revealed a mouthful of white teeth. You want to help Qin Feiyang stop me? Why? What benefits did Qin Feiyang give you? Tell me, I can give you double. Mo Wuxian was both shocked and angry. Now that he was only one step away, how could he be stopped here? Tan Wu shook his head and said, he didn't give me any benefits. Then why? Don't tell me that the #1 person in the inner palace of He province still has to curry favor with him. Where is your dignity? Where is your face? Mo Wuxian roared. Curry favor with him? Since you want to know so much, then I'll tell you. Back then, he could have killed me, but he didn't do so in the end, so I have to return this favor to him. Tan Wu said. Mo Wuxian said angrily. But you also said that your companions all died in his hands. Now that you're still helping him, are you worthy of those who died? Tan Wu was a 2-star war master, and he was also a 2-star war master. If they were to really fight, he was not afraid. Chapter 657. Qin Feiyang did indeed kill my companion. But he did spare my life. Otherwise, I wouldn't have the chance to stand here, much less be the first person to reach the other side. As a person, one must distinguish between gratitude and grudges. Tan Wu said expressionlessly. It seems that no matter what I say, you won't listen. You're determined to stop me. Mo Wuxian's gaze was gloomy. That's right. Tan Wu nodded. Since that's the case, then I can only offend you. Killing intent open. Mo Wuxian let out a stern shout, and blood energy immediately surged all over his body. This place was instantly enveloped by a terrifying killing intent. Clang. With a wave of his hand, a blood blade appeared out of nowhere, emitting a shocking sharpness. This was his strongest battle art. At the same time, a bloody light rushed out from behind him. Within the bloody light, there was a small blood-colored sword. It was only the length of a thumb, but the sharpness it released was even more terrifying than the blood blade. This was his battle soul. To use his strongest battle art at the first moment, and activate his battle soul, it was enough to show how anxious he was now. Those who block the way die. He raised his head and roared. The blood blade and the small blood-colored sword immediately shot towards Tan Wu. However, Tan Wu did not move at all, and there was not the slightest bit of nervousness on his face. I admit that you're very strong, but you're very unfortunate to have met me, because I'm invincible in the same realm. Even a 3-star war sect might not be my match. Tan Wu's body shook, and a palm-sized ancient mountain soared into the sky, floating high in the sky, emitting a mysterious aura. Following closely, strands of invisible energy gushed out from the ancient peak, surging in all directions. And when these energies enveloped the blood blade and the small blood-colored arrow, their speed suddenly slowed down, and it was directly slowed by half. How is this possible? Mo Wuxian's gaze froze. This is the innate ability of my battle soul, gravity domain. No matter what it is, as long as it's in this domain, its speed will be suppressed by half. As Tan Wu spoke, he walked towards the small blood-colored sword and the blood blade in large strides, as if they were nothing. When he got close, his body slightly tilted, and the blood blade and the small blood-colored sword brushed past him, not causing him any harm. At the same time, the gravity domain rushed towards Mo Wuxian, and Mo Wuxian immediately felt a terrifying gravitational force pressing down on him. He tried to take a step forward, and sure enough, his speed was halved. Tan Wu, take it that I'm begging you, all right? As long as you let me go, I will repay you double in the future. Initially, Mo Wuxian still had some confidence, but upon seeing this terrifying gravity domain, he started to panic. Do you think I'm a child? He's so gullible. Tan Wu shook his head as a trace of ridicule crawled up in his eyes. After spending so much time with Mo Wuxian in the Sea of Bitterness, he understood Mo Wuxian's character quite well. Not only was Mo Wuxian a snobbish person, but he was also a vengeful person. If he really let Mo Wuxian leave now, he didn't know how to deal with him in the future. I swear that I will never cause you any trouble. Please believe me, okay? Mo Wuxian pleaded. Now he could already sense Qin Feiyang's aura, which meant that he was not far from the peak. If this dragged on, it would be over for him. Tan Wu said coolly, "Want to leave is very simple, defeat me." "You damned bastard. Do you really think that I, Mo Wuxian, am a pushover? If you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish." Mo Wuxian was enraged. Clang! That blood-colored sword and blood blade turned in the air and attacked Tan Wu's back. While he executed auxiliary battle arts, carrying a monstrous killing intent as he charged towards Tan Wu head-on like a madman. At this moment, he could be said to be unscrupulous. But Tan Wu had no intention of clashing head-on with him at all. He just pestered him, not letting him leave. Qin Feiyang and the rest below also sensed the battle fluctuations of Tan Wu and Mo Wuxian. Lu Xingqian asked suspiciously, "Why did the two of them start fighting first?" "I don't know." Qin Feiyang shook his head. A moment passed. The golden-haired youth duo finally reached the peak. The moment they saw those 9 altars, their eyes revealed ecstasy. And like Mo Wuxian previously, they immediately rushed towards the altars that led to Kuan State and Changzhou. "Quickly help me." Seeing the two people come up, Mo Wuxian also seemed to have seen his savior and hurriedly called for help. However, the golden-haired youth duo did not pay attention to him at all. Because now they could not even protect themselves. How could they still help Mo Wuxian? But they did not notice that there was an invisible gravitational field in front of them. They directly barged in, and their speed immediately decreased greatly. "What's going on?" The two of them turned pale with fright. Mo Wuxian roared. "This is the gravitational field, the innate ability of Tan Wu's battle soul. It can suppress our speed. If we want to go to the altar, we have to get rid of him first." "What? He actually has such a terrifying battle soul." The golden-haired youth duo trembled both physically and mentally. The next moment, the two of them attacked at the same time, charging towards Tan Wu together with Mo Wuxian. Seeing this, Tan Wu frowned slightly. With a wave of his hand, battle chi suddenly broke out of his body, turning into a huge wave that pounced towards the three of them. Whoosh! It was also at this moment Qin Feiyang and the rest reached the peak one after another. Seeing this, Wolf King chuckled. "It's actually 1 against 3. Tan Wu, why don't you go to the heavens?" Tan Wu said angrily, "Stop making sarcastic remarks. If it wasn't for Qin Feiyang, I wouldn't be bothered to meddle in other people's business. Why aren't you coming to help?" Although the gravitational field was heaven-defying, there was still a limit. Facing Mo Wuxian and the other two, he had no confidence at all. As expected, the combined attack of the three of them directly sent Tan Wu flying, and the gravitational field also collapsed on the spot. Following closely, Mo Wuxian and the other two did not dare to delay in the slightest, and immediately rushed towards the teleportation altar of Kuan Prefecture, Changzhou, and Cloud Prefecture. At the same time, Qin Feiyang looked at Ling Yu and the other three, and transmitted his voice. "The 4 of you, you can chase after them now, but don't stop them. Wait until they activate the altar before stopping them." "Stop them after activating the altar?" The 4 of them looked at each other, their eyes filled with suspicion. But they did not ask further. Ling Yu, Zhao Yu, and Feng Ranran all stepped on a mysterious footwork and chased after the 3 of them. "They're all so fast." Qin Feiyang's eyes narrowed. He had already seen Zhao Yu's speed. She, who had perfect auxiliary combat arts, almost no one present could catch up with her. But Ling Yu and Feng Ranran's speed was actually on par with hers. In other words, Ling Yu and Feng Ranran also had perfect auxiliary combat arts. Qin Feiyang really could not figure out who exactly were these people. One had to know, perfect combat arts were almost extinct in the 9 prefectures. To be able to obtain one was already heaven-defying luck. So he could not help but begin to suspect the identity of these 3 people. He looked at Luo Dan, who was next to him, and wondered if this woman also had perfect combat arts? At the same time, Mo Wuxian and the other 2 were also panicking. This speed was too terrifying, right? The blonde youth shouted. "Quick, as long as we activate the altar, no matter how fast they are, they can't stop us." Boom. Before they got close to the altar, The three of them activated their battle chi and rushed towards the three altars. This was because by the time they got close, the altars would have already been activated. By then, they would not have to waste any more time, and could just jump up directly. Ling Yu and the other three behind the three of them did not stop them, but quietly watched the altars activate. Buzz! In less than 3 breaths, the 3 teleportation altars emitted a bright bloody light at the same time. Mo Wuxian and the other 2 were overjoyed. Now no one could stop them from leaving. Qin Feiyang, just you wait. If I don't settle this score with you, I swear I'm not human. The blonde youth laughed coldly. Mo Wuxian and the green-haired youth did not hide the murderous intent on their faces. Since the altars had already activated, they naturally had nothing to worry about. However, they did not notice that Qin Feiyang's lips were pursed into a mocking smile at this moment. 30 meters. 20 meters. 10 meters. A mere 10 meters was just a step for Mo Wuxian, and the other 2. We're finally here. The 3 of them shouted excitedly in their hearts. Their faces were also full of smiles. But just as they leaped up and were about to jump onto the altars, Ling Yu and the other 3 behind them suddenly sped up and rushed in front of them. What? The 3 of their faces suddenly changed. At the same time, Ling Yu and the other 2 leaped up and kicked Mo Wuxian and the other 2 in the chest. Accompanied by 3 painful screams, the 3 of them were suddenly sent flying and smashed onto the ground in front of Qin Feiyang and the others, spitting out blood. But the 3 of them did not hesitate and immediately got up and rushed towards the altars. I'm afraid you won't be able to leave today. Ling Yu and the other 2 stood in front of the altars. The aura of a 3-star battle grandmaster rushed towards Mo Wuxian, and the other 2 like a tidal wave. Scram! Mo Wuxian and the other 2 roared and instantly used their battle techniques to attack Ling Yu and the other 2. You really don't know what you're talking about. Sacred Sword Judgment. Zhao Yu smiled coldly and waved her lily-white hand gently. With a loud clang, a 3-foot-long sword appeared out of thin air and destroyed Mo Wuxian and the other 2's battle arts as easily as crushing dry weeds. This is impossible. The 3 of them spat out a mouthful of blood and looked at Zhao Yu in shock. Was this so-called Sacred Sword Judgment also a perfect battle technique? But what made the 3 of them even more desperate was that the bloody light from the 3 altars was dissipating. This also meant that the altars were about to close. No. The 3 of them roared hysterically, but it was useless. When the bloody light completely dissipated, the 3 of them knelt on the ground powerlessly, their faces ashen. Qin Feiyang glanced at the 3 of them and smiled faintly. Do you know why we didn't kill you on the stone stairs? Why? The blonde youth looked at him gloomily. Because you like pleasure, so we had to fulfill your wish. We let you escape here and let you successfully revive the altars because we wanted you to see hope. And just when you thought you could escape, we pushed you into the abyss and made you completely despair. How is it? Does this feeling of great joy and sorrow, of great ups and downs feel good? Qin Feiyang smiled. Puff. Hearing this, Mo Wuxian and the other 2 were instantly enraged and spat out another mouthful of blood. It turned out that from the beginning, they had been toyed with by Qin Feiyang. No matter how hard they tried, they could not escape. Now that they thought about their previous actions, even they felt that it was ridiculous. Chapter 658. It was only at this moment that the 4 of them realized what was going on. First, he gave the 3 of them hope. Then he pushed them into hell. This guy's method of torturing people was really good. Don't you guys like to fight in groups? We're just standing here. Why aren't you bringing it on? Wolf King chuckled. The contempt in his eyes was undisguised. Mo Wuxian's gaze trembled. He turned around and knelt on the ground, begging. Qin Feiyang, I was wrong. Can you let me go? Sure. Jump into the sea of bitterness yourself. If you don't die, I won't kill you. Qin Feiyang said indifferently. Mo Wuxian's body and mind trembled. With a bitter face he said, Aren't you sending me to my death? Why would I? We can escape from the sea of bitterness. With your ability, you can definitely do it too. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Mo Wuxian's face instantly turned pale. What's the use of begging him? Do you think he's a soft-hearted person? The blonde youth said. Mo Wuxian said angrily. What else do you think we should do? I don't want to die. Don't worry. We won't die because I have a plan to escape. The blonde youth said. Say it. Mo Wuxian and the green-haired youth's spirits rose. There are a few one-star battle ancestors among them. As long as we catch one of them, we can use it to threaten them. The blonde youth said. Okay, let's do it. The green-haired youth nodded without hesitation. Because there was no other way, they could only take a gamble. Mo Wuxian gritted his teeth and said, Okay, as long as we can escape, I'll listen to your orders. Then listen carefully. Later, we'll attack Qin Feiyang and attract their attention. You take the opportunity to catch those two women. According to my observation, those two women are the weakest. The blonde youth said. The two women he was referring to were Ren Wuxuang and Xin Mei. No problem. Mo Wuxian replied. With his strength, he had full confidence that as long as no one was in his way, it would be easy to catch the two of them. In the blink of an eye. As soon as the three of them reached an agreement, the golden-haired youth and the green-haired youth stood up and rushed towards Qin Feiyang with monstrous killing intent. It was as if he was going to fight to the death. Still not giving up? Everyone looked at each other with a hint of mockery in their eyes. Moreover, they didn't move at all. They just looked at the two of them quietly. Seeing this, the golden-haired youth and his companion were bewildered. What's going on? In any case, they were both three-star battle grandmasters. Although Qin Feiyang's side had the advantage in numbers, in the face of their sudden attack, they should have been more or less prepared. But why were they so indifferent now? Don't worry so much. This is a good opportunity. Because Qin Feiyang is their backbone. As long as we take him down, we can immediately turn the tables. The golden-haired youth said. The green-haired youth nodded. Qin Feiyang was much more valuable than those two women. The two of them sped towards Qin Feiyang. At the same time, they were paying close attention to Lu Xingqian, Ling Yu, Feng Ranran, and Zhao Yu, because the four of them were the people they were most afraid of. 20 meters. 10 meters. At this moment, the golden-haired youth and his companion were only one step away from Qin Feiyang. Seeing that Lu Xingqian and his companions were still indifferent, the two of them were overjoyed. They suddenly swooped down and their large hands reached out like an eagle's claw. They were about to grab Qin Feiyang. Whoosh. But at this moment, Luodan, who was on the side, took a step forward and stood in front of Qin Feiyang. Bitch, get out of my way. The two of them immediately roared angrily. At the same time, the 5 fingers of the eagle's claw-like hands suddenly contracted and clenched into a fist. Battle chi gushed out and blasted towards Luodan. However, the anxious two of them didn't notice Luodan's cultivation at all. Not only are your characters bad, even your mouths are dirty. You should be slapped. Luodan's gaze turned cold. She moved lightly and calmly avoided the two's fists. Then, she raised her jade-like hand and slapped the two of them directly in the face. Smack. 2 crisp slapping sounds were heard. It was especially ear-piercing. The golden-haired youth and his companion were sent flying on the spot. They rolled on the ground pathetically and spat out blood. Their faces were swollen like pig heads. As expected, she also mastered the perfect auxiliary battle technique. Qin Feiyang muttered. Luodan was right in front of him, so when Luodan moved earlier he saw it clearly. That speed was not inferior to Ling Yu and his companions at all. He looked at the golden-haired youth and his companion again. The two of them were stunned. They touched their burning faces and couldn't come back to their senses for a long time. Mo Wuxian, who was next to them, was even more frightened. He didn't expect Qin Feiyang to have such a terrifying woman by his side. At this moment, his heart was filled with fear, and he completely forgot the task given to him by the golden-haired youth. At the same time, Ling Yu, Feng Ranran, and Zhao Yu walked over. Ling Yu smiled and asked, Brother Qin, how do you plan to deal with them? Qin Feiyang smiled and said, Of course I'll let them have a taste of suffering. Understood. Ling Yu nodded. Don't. Mo Wuxian and his companions suddenly came back to their senses and knelt on the ground. Their pale faces were filled with panic. You don't want it and you don't want it? Ling Yu sneered. He grabbed Mo Wuxian and dragged him to the edge of the square. Please let me go. Just treat me as a dog that bites people. Being dragged to the edge of the square, Mo Wuxian was scared out of his wits when he saw the sea of blood below. He kept kowtowing to Ling Yu and begging for mercy. Don't compare yourself to a dog because you're not worthy. Ling Yu smiled disdainfully. He lifted Mo Wuxian and threw him out like trash. You bastards, I swear, I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. Mo Wuxian roared with hatred. Unable to fly in the air, he could only watch himself fall into the sea of suffering. What could be more torturous than this? More despair? In the end, with a thud, Mo Wuxian fell into the sea of suffering and was instantly swallowed by the waves of blood. Only a voice full of resentment was left, echoing between heaven and earth for a long time. He really killed. Looking at this scene, the blonde youth muttered to himself. His heart was filled with despair. Qin Dage, please let us go, okay? We swear that we will be your servants for the rest of our lives. If we break this oath, may the heavens and earth destroy us. The two of them crawled to Qin Feiyang on their knees and begged. Qin Feiyang shook his head. I don't need servants, and you're not worthy, the blonde youth said angrily. Do you really want to kill us all? If you didn't provoke us first, why would we do this to you? So, it's not me who wants to kill you, it's you who are seeking death. Qin Feiyang said lightly, then nodded to Ling Yu and the other three. The four immediately went forward and carried the two to the edge of the square. Don't. I beg you. Looking at the sea of blood below, the two were terrified. Ling Yu sneered. Even if Qin Feiyang doesn't kill you, we won't let you go. The blonde youth's heart trembled. In a hurry he shouted, fight me one-on-one. Ha! The four were stunned. If we lose, you don't have to do anything. We'll jump into the sea of suffering ourselves. But if we win, you'll let us go. The blonde youth said. Zhao Yu smiled and asked, do you think that's necessary? Why? You don't dare? The blonde youth sneered. Don't dare? Zhao Yu was so angry that he laughed and nodded. Okay, I'll fulfill your wish. Bring it on. We're not challenging you, we're challenging him. The blonde youth pointed at Qin Feiyang and shouted. Do you dare to fight with me? Fatso laughed, took a step forward and said disdainfully. You think you're qualified to challenge the boss? You want to play? Fat Lord will play with you. The blonde youth glanced at Fatso and sneered. Qin Feiyang, if you're still a man, don't hide behind others. You're courting death. Fatso's eyes were filled with murderous intent. But at this moment, Qin Feiyang pushed Fatso away and said with a faint smile, since you want to challenge me so much, I'll fulfill your wish before you die. Ren Wushuang's face suddenly changed. He grabbed Qin Feiyang's arm and said telepathically, Feiyang, you're no match for them. Don't be reckless. Don't worry. Qin Feiyang smiled and gently pushed Ren Wushuang away. Then he walked to the blonde youth and said, it's too troublesome to fight one by one. Let's fight together. What? At this moment, it was not only Ren Wushuang. Everyone was looking at Qin Feiyang with dumbstruck expressions. 1 against 2? Was this guy crazy? Didn't he know that the two blonde youth were both 3-star War Master? Even Wolf King and Fatso couldn't help but worry. They naturally understood Qin Feiyang's strength, but the two of them weren't simple people either. The most important thing was that they had never fought with the blonde youth and knew nothing about their methods and trump cards. If they had some terrifying trump card, wouldn't they be digging their own grave? At the same time, the blonde youth and the other two were also stunned. They never thought that Qin Feiyang would be so arrogant. When they came back to their senses, a brilliant smile immediately crawled onto their faces. 1 against 2? This arrogant bastard really didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. The green-haired youth said, you're the one who said it. You can't go back on your word halfway. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, don't worry, I won't go back on my word. Boom. The two of them looked at each other. The pressure of a 3-star War Master broke out of their bodies without holding back and pounced toward Qin Feiyang. The moment the pressure enveloped Qin Feiyang, a victorious smile appeared on their faces. Qin Feiyang, you're too arrogant. Actually, we can see that your strength is indeed not bad, but your cultivation is too low. To deal with you, I only need to use pressure. Now you can't even move. How are you going to use your methods? The two of them laughed. Is that so? Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and took a step forward. How is this possible? The blonde youth and the other two glared angrily, and their eyeballs were about to fall out. Fatso joked. Didn't anyone tell you that the boss has already opened the gate of potential? Pressure is useless against him. What? The gate of potential? The two of them trembled in disbelief. They really didn't know. Chapter 659. Qin Feiyang laughed. You don't even know this. It seems that in your eyes, I'm really just a small character that isn't worth mentioning. The two of them looked at him and muttered to themselves for a moment. In the past, they did not put Qin Feiyang in their eyes. They even thought that the rumors about Qin Feiyang were exaggerated. But only now did they understand that this person was even more terrifying than the rumors. One had to know. The gate of potential was a legendary existence. Yet this person had opened it. This showed how astonishing his potential and talent were. It was also enough to see how terrifying this person's future achievements were. But Qin Feiyang's cultivation was a one-star war master. This was an unchangeable fact. A mere one-star war master, no matter how heaven-defying he was. How strong could he be? Boom. The two of them looked at each other, and a cold glint appeared in their eyes. Following that, the two of them took a step forward at the same time, raised their fists and punched towards Qin Feiyang. Fight! Qin Feiyang activated the battle character art without hesitation. His long hair and eyes instantly turned red. At the same time that they activated the battle character art, the two of them punched Qin Feiyang's chest. Puff! Qin Feiyang was sent flying on the spot, and blood spurted out of his mouth. However, with the protection of the battle character art, coupled with the fact that the two of them only used normal attacks, they did not cause any fatal injuries to him. Finally, he steadily landed on the ground, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and said with a faint smile, "Is this the power of your punch?" Their gazes froze. Although they did not use any battle arts, this punch contained their full strength, and they were actually able to withstand it. At the same time, a great sense of humiliation emerged in their hearts. Two 3-star War Master joined hands and attacked with all their might, yet they were unable to defeat the other party. Boom! Their bodies trembled, and battle chi surged out from their bodies like a torrent. Luo Yen sword formation! The golden-haired youth roared, and the battle chi that filled the sky instantly turned into 9 battle swords, forming a sword formation that rotated above his head. Each battle sword seemed to be cast from divine iron, emitting a bone-piercing sharpness. In the meantime, the green-haired youth waved his hands, and the temperature in the area plummeted, as if winter had arrived. Clang! Following closely, all of his battle chi gathered together, and condensed into a huge profound ice sword that was dozens of meters long, hovering in the sky. Kill! As the two of them roared, the profound ice greatsword and the sword array swooped down and slashed towards Qin Feiyang. High-grade slaughter battle arts, coupled with their cultivation of a 3-star War Master. They even have the power to fight against a 6-star War Master. How is this Qin Feiyang going to deal with them? Ling Yu and the others thought to themselves. Qin Feiyang raised his head and looked at the sword formation and the black ice greatsword, his eyes gradually becoming sharp. Boom! He raised his arm, golden light surging in his palm. Immediately, with Qin Feiyang as the center, a mighty divine might rolled out in all directions. What is this? The golden-haired young man narrowed his eyes. No matter what it is, he will definitely lose. The green-haired young man snorted coldly. As long as they used their battle arts, even if Qin Feiyang had a perfect battle art, he would not be their match. This was because Qin Feiyang's cultivation was 2 whole realms lower than theirs. However, they did not know that the return character formula was not something that a battle art could compare to. The return character formula was one of the 6-word divine formulas. To be able to be called a divine formula, its lethality was naturally stronger than a perfect battle art. Boom! Qin Feiyang's arm trembled, and a golden light burst out from his palm, turning into a monstrous torrent that drowned the sky, and blasted towards the sword array and the profound ice greatsword. Clang! An ear-piercing sound suddenly exploded in the sky. Under everyone's incredulous gazes, the sword array and the profound ice greatsword were in a stalemate with the golden light for a while, then suddenly turned in the air and charged towards the golden-haired young man and his companion. Seeing this scene, the golden-haired young man and his companion were so scared that their souls almost left their bodies, and they hurriedly fled. Boom! However, just as they left, the sword array and the profound ice greatsword arrived behind them. The two battle arts blasted onto the ground, and immediately created a storm of sword chi that swept wildly. Although the golden-haired young man and his companion escaped in time, they were still swept by the sword chi storm, and were instantly covered in cuts and bruises, dripping with blood. The heart-wrenching pain caused their faces to contort, and they howled in pain. "Boss is too awesome." Fatso clenched his fists, and his face was flushed red as if he had been injected with chicken blood. Wolf King rolled his eyes at him and said, "It's not that he's awesome, it's the return character formula that's awesome." The current situation was very obvious. The return character formula's power was at least twice as strong as a perfect battle art. In other words, if a perfect battle art could increase one's combat strength by 4 realms, then the return character formula could increase one's combat strength by 5 or even 6 realms. Bang! The golden-haired young man and his companion rolled on the ground, their hair disheveled, and their bodies badly mangled. They were in an extremely sorry state. "Even with a battle art, we still lost? This is impossible, we must be dreaming." The two looked at Qin Feiyang, who was standing there proudly, and their eyes were filled with disbelief. Qin Feiyang, with his hands behind his back, calmly glanced at the two, and said, "What other tricks do you have? Use them all." In fact, his arm was also numb. He put it behind his back to cover up this point. Looking at Qin Feiyang's calm eyes, the two suddenly felt humiliated. They endured the pain, and got up from the ground. The golden-haired young man said coldly, "This time, we will definitely end your little life." "Is that so?" Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Before his voice died away, roar! Accompanied by 2 deafening beastly roars, 2 behemoths rose into the air from behind the golden-haired young man and his companion. These were their fighting souls. Qin Feiyang was surprised. The two's fighting souls were actually flood dragons. The golden-haired young man's fighting soul flood dragon was golden all over, as if it was cast from gold. The green-haired young man's fighting soul flood dragon seemed to be condensed from ice. It was crystal clear and cold. The 2 flood dragons were more than 100 feet long, like 2 mountain ranges in the sky, and a terrifying fierce aura rolled in all directions. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "The flood dragon fighting soul is considered a rare fighting soul in the 9 prefectures. No wonder you dare to be so arrogant and look down on others." Hearing this, the golden-haired young man and his companion were proud of themselves, but Qin Feiyang suddenly changed the topic, and said, "But after all, it is not a real dragon soul. What can it do?" "Arrogant. I would like to see how you break our gifted superpowers. Gifted superpowers freeze all things. Gifted superpowers split the sky." The two were furious, and with a wave of their hands, the 2 flood dragons above suddenly opened their wide mouths and spat out 2 streams of air. But the difference was, the green-haired young man's flood dragon fighting soul spat out a white stream of air, which was cold and piercing to the bone. The void above instantly condensed into blocks of ice. The golden-haired young man's flood dragon fighting soul spat out a golden stream of air, which was like sword chi, exuding a sharp aura that could destroy the world. These 2 different streams of air, as soon as they appeared, swept across the sky and went straight for Qin Feiyang. "It's so cold." Shinmei hugged her shoulders and looked at the white stream of air in horror. The cold air emitted by the stream of air could not be dispelled by battle chi, and directly entered her body through her pores, freezing her blood. The sharpness of the golden stream of air is also very scary. Dong Jingyang's face was solemn. They were hundreds of meters apart, but when the sharpness surged, he could not help but feel waves of intense pain, let alone Qin Feiyang, who was standing opposite them. At this moment he must be facing a lot of pressure. Dong Jingyang could not help but feel worried. Indeed, as Dong Jingyang had expected, Qin Feiyang was not feeling well at all. The cold air rushed toward him, and his limbs were almost stiff. The invisible sharpness even tore his clothes, leaving glaring wounds on his body. Looks like I've underestimated their battle souls. However, you're not the only ones with battle souls. His eyes shone brightly as he muttered to himself. Boom! A wave of fire surged out from behind him. Amidst the wave of fire, the 9-leaf fire lotus was completely red, and it exuded a majestic aura. The temperature in this place rose rapidly as well. In an instant, the void around Qin Feiyang seemed to have turned into a huge furnace. Following that, Qin Feiyang waved his arm. The 9 fire lotus leaves fell at the same time. They swept up waves of fire as they shot toward the 2 flood dragons. Explode! Qin Feiyang's eyes shone brightly as he shouted. Every word was sonorous and powerful, and it resounded through the clouds. Boom! The 9 fire lotus leaves exploded one after another, and the destructive shockwaves immediately surged out in all directions with an overwhelming force. At this moment, the sky changed color, and the void trembled. Dong Zhengyang and the others were forced to retreat. Their eyes were filled with shock. It's rare to see 9 fire lotus leaves exploding at the same time. Fatso muttered. That's right. This proves that their battle souls are really powerful. Wolf King said. Fatso's eyes were filled with disdain as he snorted. No matter how powerful they are, how can they be more powerful than Boss? Boss has 3 battle souls. 3? When Dong Zhengyang and the others heard this, they looked at Fatso in shock. Ling Yu and the other 3 might not know, but Dong Zhengyang and the others knew very well that Qin Feiyang only had 2 battle souls. Why would Fatso say that he had 3? Could it be that Qin Feiyang was hiding another battle soul? Fatso immediately realized that he had let it slip. He smiled sheepishly and said, I'm sorry, it's 2. Really? Lu Xingchen looked at him doubtfully. Fatso said angrily, Nonsense, how can there be anyone in this world who has 3 battle souls? That's true. Lu Xingchen nodded. People who had 2 battle souls were already rare, let alone 3. Such people did not exist at all. Everyone did not think too much about it. They looked at the sky again, and saw that the 2 flood dragons only had half of their bodies left. The golden-haired young man and Dong Zhengyang looked at their battle souls in shock. What kind of battle soul was the 9-leaf fire lotus? How could it be so ridiculously powerful? However, Qin Feiyang was slightly disappointed. Initially, he thought that the explosion of the 9 fire lotus leaves could easily destroy the 2 flood dragons. However, only half of them were destroyed. However, when he thought about it, there was a huge gap between his cultivation base and theirs. The fact that the 9-leaf fire lotus could do this proved that it was stronger than the flood dragon's battle souls. If he was a 3-star combat grandmaster now, the 9-leaf fire lotus would definitely be able to achieve an overwhelming victory. In fact, he might only need 1 fire lotus leaf to destroy the 2 flood dragons' battle souls. When he thought about this, he felt relieved. It's time to end this. Then he muttered under his breath. His gaze changed abruptly. It was as sharp as a blade. Clang! Another wave of flames shot into the sky. Amidst the flames, the crimson battle sword was like a divine weapon. Sword Qi shot into the sky and tore through the clouds. Destroy! As Qin Feiyang waved his hand, the battle sword tore through the sky and slashed toward the 2 flood dragons. Qin Feiyang did not even use his innate ability. There was no need for that. The 2 flood dragons were already arrows at the end of their flight. Roar! As expected, the battle sword's aura was like a rainbow. The 2 flood dragons were reduced to ashes on the spot. Pooh! The destruction of their battle souls caused the golden-haired young man and his companion to tremble. They kept vomiting blood. Their blood-stained faces were ashen. Qin Feiyang was too powerful. Although he was only a 1-star combat grandmaster, he was like an invincible god of war. A sense of helplessness rose in their hearts. Clang! The crimson battle sword descended from the sky and stopped above the 2 flood dragons' heads. Sensing the terrifying sharpness, the 2 flood dragons immediately collapsed powerlessly. Qin Feiyang looked at the 2 flood dragons from afar and said indifferently, You've lost. We've lost. The 2 flood dragons muttered with self-mockery on their faces. 2 3-star combat grandmasters against a 1-star combat grandmaster, yet they still lost. It was too laughable. Rather than living with humiliation, it was better to die with pride. Swoosh. Chapter 660. Looking at the surging waves on the sea, Qin Feiyang and the others were a little stunned. They thought that the two of them would shamelessly beg for mercy again, but they didn't expect them to jump down so straightforwardly. Ling Yu smiled and said, "Their current behavior is quite admirable. They have no choice. They have nothing left but their last bit of self-respect." Tan Wu sighed. Wolf King turned to look at him and asked in confusion, "You just said that you stopped them for little Qin Zi?" "Yes." Tan Wu nodded and looked at Qin Feiyang. "From now on, you and I don't owe each other anything," Qin Feiyang said with a smile. "We're all family. You're too polite." Family? Lu Xingqian and the others were surprised. What was going on? Weren't these two people at odds? When did they become so close? Tan Wu scratched his head and was also dumbfounded. Only Fatso and Wolf King knew that Qin Feiyang hadn't given up on the idea of subduing Tan Wu. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "You don't understand? Then I'll explain it to you. As long as you agree to join us, we'll be family." Tan Wu's face darkened and he said angrily, "Don't even think about it." Qin Feiyang said, "I don't want to either, but I like you too much. I can't control myself." Damn, so mushy. Everyone present had goosebumps all over their bodies. This bastard. Couldn't he be more serious when he spoke? A man telling another man that he liked you and even said that he couldn't control himself. Wasn't this perverted? At the same time, Tan Wu also looked at Qin Feiyang vigilantly. His hands were placed in front of his chest, looking like he was startled. Obviously, he really misunderstood and thought that Qin Feiyang had some special fetish. Cough cough. Run Wushuang glanced at Tan Wu and coughed dryly. "Feiyang, you have to watch your words." Ugh. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He looked helplessly at Tan Wu and said, "Don't misunderstand. I only fancy your talent and ability. I'm not interested in you as a person." Who? Tan Wu immediately heaved a sigh in relief and shook his head as he said, "This is absolutely impossible." Qin Feiyang said, "What if I tell you that I can help you unlock the door of potential?" Tan Wu's eyes trembled. Who wouldn't be tempted by such a temptation? However, to be Qin Feiyang's follower for the rest of his life, he really couldn't let go of his pride. In the end, he shook his head and said, "I'm sorry. Although I'm eager to open the door of potential, I prefer to be unrestrained." Qin Feiyang couldn't help but frown. This person was really stubborn. Looking at Qin Feiyang's expression, a sense of uneasiness involuntarily welled up in Tan Wu's heart. He clasped his hands and said, "The favor has already been repaid. The remaining matters have nothing to do with me either. Farewell." Of the 36 stratagems, escape is the best strategy. But at this moment, Wolf King took a step in front of him and said with a chuckle, "Want to leave? It's not that easy." Fatso also had a sinister smile on his face as he blocked behind Tan Wu. Tan Wu's gaze turned dark. He was not afraid of anyone present, except for Wolf King, because Wolf King's battle soul was seriously too terrifying. Qin Feiyang looked at Tan Wu, his gaze flickering indeterminately. Finally, he said to Wolf King and Fatso, "Let him go." Amen. One man and one wolf frowned. Tan Wu also had a look of surprise. Qin Feiyang said with a faint smile, "I believe that sooner or later, you'll come and find me one day. I also welcome you to come and find me at any time." "That will never happen." Tan Wu's reply was very straightforward. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "Then we'll wait and see." Tan Wu took a deep look at Qin Feiyang, then walked straight to the altar and quickly activated it. Qin Feiyang seemed to have suddenly thought of something and said with a voice transmission, "Tan Wu, I have a question to ask you. Is your gravity domain effective on everyone?" "It's effective on everyone, but it also depends on the other party's cultivation. If the opponent's cultivation is the same as mine, it can suppress half of their speed. But if their cultivation is one small realm higher than mine, then they can only suppress 1/3 of their speed. If it's 2 small realms higher than me, there will also be a certain suppression effect, but the effect won't be great." Tan Wu explained with a voice transmission. Qin Feiyang said with a smile, This is already very powerful. In a battle between powerhouses, speed was the key to affecting the battle situation. Even if it was just a little bit faster, it was possible to turn defeat into victory. Are there any other questions? If not, I'll give you a piece of advice. Tan Wu said. Speak. Qin Feiyang said. Tan Wu said. You killed everyone in my He province. When the big shots find out about this, they will definitely come looking for trouble with you. You'd better be careful. After saying that, Tan Wu jumped onto the altar and quickly disappeared from everyone's sight. Looking for trouble with me? Qin Feiyang muttered, the corners of his mouth pursing into a sneer. Fatso frowned and asked with a voice transmission in confusion. Boss, didn't you want to take him in as your subordinate? Why did you let him go? Then let me ask you first. If it were you and someone else offered to help you open the door of potential, would you refuse? I want to hear the truth. Qin Feiyang asked secretly. No. Fatso shook his head. But this person refused. What does this mean? This means that his will is very firm and he won't be confused by external things. And this kind of person, once he chooses to follow someone, he will always follow them wholeheartedly and will never betray them. So we can't use force to deal with him. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. So that's how it is. Fatso suddenly understood and chuckled. Boss, don't worry, Fat Lord will never betray you. Come on, if not for the potential pill, if not for my identity, you might have flown away long ago. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at him. Fatso's expression changed, and he said angrily. Damn, after going through fire and water with you for so long, you still don't believe in Fat Lord, so sad. Then you can slowly be sad. Qin Feiyang glanced at Fatso indifferently, then lowered his head to look at Wan Qiu and the other three. This damn Fatso, when he was smart he was a little too smart, but when he was stupid, he was so stupid that it made people helpless. He couldn't tell that he was just joking, but he actually took it seriously. At this moment, the four of them had already gotten rid of the illusion, but they did not go ashore. They stood on the boat and looked up at Qin Feiyang and the others. Wolf King sneered. They are obviously afraid that we will attack them, so they want to wait for us to leave before going ashore. Is it useful? Qin Feiyang smiled coldly. It is indeed useless. Wolf King waved his claws, and a bright battle chi appeared, roaring towards Wan Qiu and the others. Damn it. They really haven't forgotten about us. Wan Qiu's face suddenly became gloomy. Feng Wuxia shouted. Don't talk nonsense, go ashore. Staying in the sea of bitterness would only lead to death in the end, but as long as they went ashore, they might find a chance to live. The four of them immediately drove the boat and rushed towards the stone stairs. A mere 100 meters was naturally nothing to the four of them, and they quickly reached the shore and climbed up the first step of the stone stairs. At the same time, the battle chi swooped down and suddenly blasted into the sea of blood, causing a wave of blood dozens of meters high to surge towards the four of them. Seeing this, the four of them hurriedly rushed up the stone stairs. Splash! Boom! The waves of blood surged over, violently slamming against the stone stairs, making a deafening sound. After escaping from danger, the four of them stood on a high step and looked down at the huge waves with lingering fear. If they did not choose to go ashore just now, they would have been swallowed by the waves of blood. But the crisis was not over. Qin Feiyang and the others were still watching from above. What should we do? The twin sisters looked helplessly at Feng Wuxia and Wan Qiu. But Feng Wuxia and Wan Qiu were also helpless. At the edge of the square, Lu Xingqian looked at Feng Wuxia and the others, and his eyes flashed as he sent a voice transmission. Qin Feiyang, let them go. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. Lu Xingqian thought to himself. Just do me a favor. Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment and nodded. Okay, I'll do you a favor, but I hope you can tell me the reason as soon as possible. Lu Xingqian said. When the time is right, I will tell you everything. Qin Feiyang didn't say anything else. He turned to look at Ling Yu and the other three, cupped his hands, and said with a smile. The four of you, our cooperation along the way can be considered very pleasant. When we enter the imperial capital in the future, I hope that the four of you can help us out a little. Brother Qin, You are too polite. We are the ones who need help. Ling Yu smiled. Qin Feiyang smiled and cupped his hands. Then we will see each other in the imperial capital. Okay. The four of them nodded. Let's go. Qin Feiyang called out and walked towards the altar that led to the spiritual state. They are leaving just like that? Dong Zhengyang was slightly taken aback. He caught up with Qin Feiyang and asked, "Why didn't you kill them?" Now was the best time to kill Wan Qiu and the others. If they missed it, they might never find such an opportunity again. Let's talk about it after we enter the imperial capital. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Dong Zhengyang looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. He really could not figure out what this guy was thinking. Walking to the altar, Qin Feiyang raised his arm and was about to activate the teleportation altar. However, he suddenly put down his arm and frowned. What's wrong? Fatso and the others looked at him in confusion. Qin Feiyang said, I seem to have forgotten that there is one more thing to do. What is it? Everyone was puzzled. Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment, and his brows gradually relaxed as he smiled. I remember. As he spoke, he waved his hand, and a stream of red sword energy flowed into the altar. Soon, the altar bloomed with a dazzling light. Qin Feiyang looked at Dong Zhengyang and the others and said with a smile, Go up. Everyone looked at him suspiciously and jumped onto the altar one after another. But just as Dongfang Wuhan and Morong Xiong jumped onto the altar, Qin Feiyang suddenly stretched out his hand and pulled the two of them down, making them roll on the ground awkwardly. This action immediately attracted everyone's attention. Wolf King and Lu Xingqian also remembered that there was indeed one more thing to do. There was also a touch of ridicule in their eyes. However, Dongfang Wuhan and Morong Xiong were completely unaware of it. They only thought that Qin Feiyang was dissatisfied with them going up first. The two of them hurriedly got up, retreated to the side, and smiled apologetically. Junior brother Qin, sorry, you go first. Qin Feiyang crossed his arms and looked at the two of them playfully. The two of them were shocked, and an uneasy premonition welled up in their hearts. Qin Feiyang asked with a smile, Don't you think it's strange? What's strange? The two of them were puzzled. Qin Feiyang raised the corner of his mouth slightly and said, Answer my question first. Do you think that you deserve to be killed for what you did on the way? Yes, yes, yes. Chapter 661. Qin Feiyang continued. Then do you know why not only did I not kill you, I even helped you reach the other side? Dongfang Wuhan suppressed the uneasiness in his heart and smiled. Because junior brother Qin has a good heart. Haha. Qin Feiyang couldn't help but laugh and shook his head. It's not like you don't know me. Do I look like a good person? Looking at the smile on Qin Feiyang's face, the uneasiness in their hearts grew stronger. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang's gaze turned cold as he sneered. The reason why I didn't kill you was because I wanted to keep you alive until now. The two of them trembled both physically and mentally, and their faces were filled with panic. You've seen the despair of Mo Wuxian and the other two, right? You'll be the same as them. No, you'll be even more desperate than them. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with a cold light. Junior brother Qin, please don't. We've already sincerely repented. Please let us live. The two of them knelt down without hesitation and kowtowed like they were pounding garlic. Their foreheads hit the ground and made thumping sounds. Let you go. All right, I'll give you a chance. The altar is right in front of you and has already been activated. As long as you can reach it, I won't kill you. Qin Feiyang smiled coldly. Whoosh. The two of them looked at each other. Then, they immediately got up and went around Qin Feiyang at top speed. Then they jumped and landed on the altar. Naive. But Fatso, who was standing on the altar, smiled disdainfully and kicked the two of them back. Bang. The two of them rolled on the ground, their eyes swollen and bruised. But now, how could they have the time to care about their injuries? They quickly knelt on the ground and begged. Junior brother Qin, please don't kill us. That wasn't enough. The two of them looked at Ren Wushuang and said, Junior brother Qin listens to you the most. Can you help us plead for mercy? We really know our mistakes. I've already pleaded for you more than once or twice, but what about you? You still haven't changed. Ren Wushuang said expressionlessly. We've already changed. Didn't you see it? We didn't do anything after that. The two of them shouted anxiously. Ren Wuxuang looked at the two of them coldly, and looked at Qin Feiyang and said, Feiyang, quickly get rid of them. You damned woman. Since we can't live, then you can't live either. The faces of the two instantly became distorted. Like two mad beasts, they rushed towards Ren Wuxuang. You actually dare to scold her? You really don't know death. Fatty clenched his fists and jumped off the altar. With a single step, he charged forward and punched out with both fists. Two fists landed solidly on the two men's lower abdomens. Their sea of qi shattered on the spot, and their blood-curdling screams resounded through the skies. He directly threw Wuxuang and threw Feiyang. At last, without any suspense, the two of them fell into the sea of bitterness with hearts full of resentment and despair, drowning in the waves of blood. Trash! Fatso glanced at the sea in disdain, then turned to Qin Feiyang and laughed. Boss, it's done. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, Let's go. Okay. Fatso shouted and quickly jumped up the altar. Qin Feiyang also jumped up and saluted Ling Yu and the others. Goodbye. Goodbye. The four of them also saluted. Only after Qin Feiyang and the others disappeared did the four of them look away. Ling Yu shook his head and smiled. This guy really hasn't changed at all. Anyone who offends him doesn't end well. The three of them also had a smile on their faces. But suddenly, Feng Ranran frowned and asked suspiciously, What's going on with Wan Qiu and the others? Qin Feiyang was planning to kill them before. Why did he suddenly give up? Why don't we help him get rid of them? Zhao Yu was eager to try. Don't. Ling Yu hurriedly stopped her. Qin Feiyang must have his reasons for doing this. It's better if we don't interfere. That's right, if we ruin his plans when we meet in the future he might blame us. Luo Dan smiled. Boring. Zhao Yu pouted his red lips. Ling Yu shook his head and laughed. Let's go. It's time to report to that old man. With that, the four of them also activated the altar and left. However, Wan Qiu and the others did not know that Qin Feiyang and the others had left. Because the teleportation altar was in the center of the square, they could not see it. They all thought that Qin Feiyang and the others were still waiting for them. Therefore, the four of them were hesitant. Time passed breath by breath, and after an hour, Feng Wuxia finally could not hold it in and said angrily, Isn't it just death? What's the big deal? You guys wait here, I'll go meet them. After saying that, he ignored the twins' attempts to stop him and dashed upwards. But when he reached the peak, he was dumbfounded. Where are they? Why are they all gone? After a long while he came back to his senses. He walked to the edge of the square and shouted at Wan Qiu and the others, They're all gone, come up. Gone. The three of them looked at each other in confusion. When they reached the peak, they looked at the empty square, and could not come back to their senses for a long time. Feng Wuxia said, Although I don't know why, I'm sure we're saved. That bastard pervert, what is he planning? The sisters frowned. They really could not figure it out. Don't think about it, let's go, Feng Wuxia urged. He did not want to stay in this damned place for a moment longer. The sisters nodded and followed Feng Wuxia to the altar that led to Kong Province. Wan Qiu looked at the backs of the three and said, The next time we meet in the imperial capital, we might be opponents. At that time, I won't show mercy. Then let's wait and see. Feng Wuxia smiled evilly. He activated the altar and left without looking back. Wan Qiu glanced at the endless sea of blood with a cold glint in his eyes. He muttered, Qin Feiyang, just you wait, I'll settle this score with you. Then he activated the altar and left. This place soon fell into a dead silence. Butterfly Valley Spiritual State. In the secret chamber under the small wooden building, the ugly old woman sat beside the teleportation altar with her eyes slightly narrowed. Suddenly, she opened her eyes and two beams of light shot out. Then, she looked at the teleportation altar, which suddenly emitted a bright light. Are they back? The ugly old woman muttered, looking nervous and expectant. Suddenly, several figures appeared on the altar out of thin air. The leader was Qin Feiyang. They're back. Looking at the familiar secret chamber, Qin Feiyang and the others let out long sighs of relief. Thinking back to the years in the 9th level of hell, it was like a nightmare. Collecting their thoughts, they jumped off the altar one after another and looked at the ugly old woman with fear. They bowed and said, "Greetings, Senior." When they first came to Butterfly Valley, the scene of this old woman brutally killing those who wanted to pick herbs was still vivid in their minds. However, the ugly old woman didn't care about the others. Her gaze was firmly locked onto Qin Feiyang as she said, "Did you win?" "Yes. Although we're not the first people to reach the other side, we're all in the top 50. Qin Feiyang smiled. "Good." The ugly old woman was overjoyed. She patted Qin Feiyang's shoulder and nodded. "Kid, I knew you wouldn't let me down." Qin Feiyang scratched his head and laughed dryly. After the ugly old woman calmed down, she glanced at everyone and said coldly, "Qin Feiyang and Fatso stay here. Everyone else, go out first." "Yes." Lu Xingqian and the others responded respectfully and left the secret room as if they were running for their lives. The Wolf King lay on Qin Feiyang's shoulder, and the black dragon snake coiled around Fatso's wrist. Naturally, they stayed behind. "You're being so mysterious. You're definitely up to no good." Fatso pursed his lips and said, "Old witch, can you give us the antidote for the black fiend poison now?" "What did you call me?" The ugly old woman's face turned cold. No, it's Senior." Fatso's expression changed. With a flattering smile, he changed his words. "Senior, can you give us the antidote?" Before entering the 9th level of hell, the ugly old woman gave them the black fiend poison again. She even said that it was an evolved version of the black fiend poison. Although they didn't pay much attention to it in the 9th level of hell, it was still troublesome. The ugly old woman rolled her eyes at him, and took out 2 black pills, and threw them to the 2 of them. The pills were the size of a finger, and emitted a faint fragrance. Qin Feiyang and Fatso each grabbed one, and threw it into their mouths. Then they looked into their hearts. That pill was really magical. As soon as it entered their bodies, it turned into a wave of energy, and went straight to their hearts. In less than 10 breaths, the black fiend poison was completely neutralized. Seeing that the black fiend poison was neutralized, Qin Feiyang couldn't help but let out a long breath. He looked up at the ugly old woman and asked, "Senior, why did you use this method to force us to win?" The ugly old woman pondered for a moment and sighed. "Because I want to leave the spiritual state and enter the imperial capital." "Leave the spiritual state?" Qin Feiyang and Fatso looked at each other, their eyes full of suspicion. "Seeing that you two get along quite well, I'll tell you. I'm actually the previous mansion master of the spiritual state," the ugly old woman said. Qin Feiyang, Fatso, and Wolf King's eyes widened. They never thought that this old witch was actually the previous mansion master. No wonder even Wang Hong had to be respectful when he saw her. "Isn't it a little hard to believe?" The ugly old woman laughed. It would have been fine if she didn't laugh, but this laugh made the scar on her face even more twisted and terrifying. The 2 men and 2 beasts didn't dare to look. Qin Feiyang nodded and said, "It is a little hard to believe." "Humph. Let me tell you, I'm much stronger than Old Man Ren. It's just that ever since I stepped down, I've been staying here and have never shown my face in front of anyone. So much so that not many people know me." The ugly old woman snorted. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, "Then why are you staying here, Senior?" "This old body is here to protect this teleportation altar, because this is not only the passage to the netherworld, but also the only passage to the imperial capital. So, there must be someone guarding here at all times," the ugly old woman explained. "So that's how it is." Qin Feiyang and Fatso were enlightened. Fatso asked, "Then does the other 8 states also have such altars?" "Yes." The ugly old woman nodded. Qin Feiyang was puzzled. "Then why did you step down, Senior?" "Because I want to live in the imperial capital forever. Although being the mansion master gives me the opportunity to enter the imperial capital, this will never be realized." The ugly old woman sighed deeply. Chapter 662. What do you mean? Qin Feiyang and Fatu were puzzled. The mansion master was the highest authority in the 9 states. It could be said that they contributed greatly to the prosperity of the 9 states. Logically speaking, after they succeeded and retired, they should enter the imperial capital to retire. But why did the old woman say that it was impossible to stay in the imperial capital for a long time? Let's talk as we walk. The ugly old woman pondered for a while, raised her head and said to the two, then turned around and walked slowly along the passage towards the exit. Qin Feiyang and Fatso looked at each other and followed silently. Wolf King and Black Dragon Snake were also unprecedentedly obedient, remaining silent along the way. After walking for a while, the ugly old woman finally spoke. Actually, there is another way to enter the imperial capital. What way? Qin Feiyang was surprised. To cultivate a group of talents. To put it simply, whether we, the old people guarding the altar, can enter the imperial capital has something to do with you young people. If you young people can win the 9 states war, then we can enter the imperial capital, or enjoy our old age in the imperial capital, or get an official position. But in the 100 years before you, almost no one successfully completed the 9 states war. There were even several times when the people of the spiritual state were completely annihilated in the 9 nether underworld. I really can't wait any longer. That's why this time, I used the black poison to force you to win. The ugly old woman said. So that's how it is. Qin Feiyang muttered and asked. Then senior, can you enter the imperial capital now? Yes. The ugly old woman nodded and said with a smile. So I have to thank you properly. Fatso's eyes lit up and he asked. How do you want to thank me? The ugly old woman pondered for a while and said. You can pick the herbs outside. This, Qin Feiyang and Fatu looked at each other. Then their eyes became hot. Wolf King, who was lying on Qin Feiyang's shoulder, was drooling. One had to know. There were countless medicinal herbs in the Butterfly Valley. Furthermore, they were all extremely rare medicinal herbs. It could be said that this was a huge treasure trove. On the other hand, the black dragon snake coiled around Fatso's wrist looked at them suspiciously. What kind of medicinal herb could make these 3 fellows so excited? Looking at Qin Feiyang's expression, the ugly old woman couldn't help but shake her head and laugh. Although you are allowed to pluck as much as you want, you should know when to stop and leave some for Old Man Ren. Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked in confusion. What does this have to do with the old master? Of course it's related. When I enter the imperial capital, the heavy responsibility of guarding the altar will fall on him. In other words, this will be his territory from now on. The ugly old woman laughed. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, Senior, do you mean that the old master also has to step down? That's right. The people who guard the altars must be extremely powerful. The prefecture lord is, without a doubt, the strongest existence in the 9 great provinces. You don't have to feel unjust for Old Man Ren, because this is the rule set by the emperor. Moreover, Old Man Ren has long wanted to step down. You may think that the prefecture lord has great power and is very dignified, but it's actually very tiring. In addition, Old Man Ren also wants to go to the imperial capital to enjoy his old age. If he doesn't step down and become the guardian of the altars, then his wish will never be fulfilled. This is the sorrow of being born in the 9 great provinces. The 9 great provinces originally belonged to the Great Qin Empire, and we are all citizens of the Great Qin Empire. However, it's as difficult as ascending to the heavens to enter the imperial capital. The ugly old woman sighed deeply, and there was a trace of injustice in her tone. Fatso said in his heart, Boss, Fat Lord thinks that the Great Qin Empire's system really needs to be changed, because it's too unfair to the people of the 9 great provinces. Indeed. Wolf King nodded. Change. Qin Feiyang shook his head and said with a smile, It's not as easy as you make it out to be. These systems are set by the emperor of each generation. Other than the emperor, no one has the right to change them. Fatso chuckled and said, Then we'll wait until you become the emperor to change them. Don't talk nonsense. This is a crime of treason. If it falls into the ears of someone with ulterior motives, it will lead to a fatal disaster. Qin Feiyang shouted in his heart. What are you afraid of? It's only a matter of time anyway. Fatso curled his lips in disdain. Qin Feiyang helplessly glared at him. then looked at the ugly old woman and asked suspiciously, "After the old mandarin steps down, who will take over the position of prefecture lord?" I guess that old mandarin already has a suitable candidate in mind. However, he can only recommend it to the emperor. In the end, it's up to the emperor to decide whether it will succeed or not. The ugly old woman said. Qin Feiyang nodded and lowered his head to ponder. Who would the old mandarin's candidate be? Wang Hong? If one were to judge based on strength and character, Wang Hong was the most likely candidate. Unknowingly, the 3 men and 2 beasts left the passage and arrived outside the small wooden building. At that moment, streams of aura entered Qin Feiyang's senses. He looked up and saw Lu Xingqian and the others standing in the air, whispering to each other. Wang Hong and Jiang Qianqing were also among them, their faces full of smiles. The ugly old woman said, Wang Hong, Jiang Qianqing, you guys go first. I still have something to ask Qin Feiyang and Fatso to do. Yes. Wang Hong and Jiang Qianqing replied respectfully. Then, Wang Hong looked at Qin Feiyang and transmitted his voice. Kid, after you're done with your business, go and see the prefecture lord immediately. Okay. Qin Feiyang replied in his heart. Then, Wang Hong opened a portal and quickly left with Lu Xingqian and the others. Strange. Fatso looked at the portal and frowned. What's strange? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Fatso said. Aren't Wang Hong and Jiang Qianqing also in the 9 nether yellow springs? Where did they come from? The ugly old woman said. They are only escorting you in. After you leave, the power of the rules of the 9 nether yellow springs will take the initiative to send them out. Qin Feiyang asked, Senior, did you also participate in the 9 regions Great War? Of course. Every prefecture lord is chosen from those who participated in the 9 regions Great War. But they are all failures, because those who succeeded all went to the imperial capital. The ugly old woman said somewhat awkwardly. In other words, you were also a failure back then? Haha, so you're so bad. Fatso suddenly laughed out loud. The ugly old woman's face darkened and said coldly, Do you believe that I won't cripple you? Fatso shrunk his neck in fright and immediately shut his mouth, but his face was red. Don't shoot your mouth off. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at Fatso and sighed. Those who succeed enter the imperial capital. Those who fail become prefecture lords or commanders. In fact, as long as they can come out alive, their achievements in the future will not be too low. It's just that the price is too high. Yes. Countless people enter the 9 nether yellow springs one after another, but how many survive in the end? But what can be done? It's just that this world is too cruel. The ugly old woman sighed deeply, then shook her head and said with a smile, Let's not talk about it. Go and pick the herbs. Okay. At the mention of herbs, Qin Feiyang, Jiang Qianqing, and Wolf King were extremely excited as if they had been injected with chicken blood. But just as they flew into the sky, Qin Feiyang suddenly thought of something. He looked down at the old woman and asked in confusion, Senior, you just told Wang Hong and Jiang Qianqing that you have something for Fatso and me to do. What is it? Idiot. The ugly old woman rolled her eyes at Qin Feiyang, then turned and entered the small wooden house without looking back. What do you mean? Fatso scratched his head, his face full of suspicion. Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment, then said in realization, I understand. She said that to send Lu Xingqian and the others away. Send them away? Fatso was stunned. Think about it. Lu Xingqian and the others are the same as us. They have also won the 9 states battle. If she only lets us pick the herbs and doesn't let them do it, won't they say that she is biased behind her back? Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Haha. Fatso was stunned, then he laughed and said, I didn't expect this old witch to be so scheming. A row of black lines immediately appeared on Qin Feiyang's forehead. He angrily said, That's enough. If your disrespect angers her and she doesn't let us pick the medicinal herbs, I won't forgive you. Hee hee. Don't worry, she can't hear you. Fatso laughed mischievously. But before he finished, the ugly old woman's cold voice came from the small wooden house. Although this old woman is old, my ears are still very good. Damn Fatso, you better be careful. Hearing this, Fatso's face changed and he smiled apologetically. Did you hear that? Be careful. Qin Feiyang glanced at Fatso with schadenfreude and flew towards the sea of flowers. Fatso raised his middle finger in disdain and quickly followed. In the sea of flowers, hundreds of flowers bloomed, and the fragrance of flowers assailed the nose. The herbs were like slender and elegant young girls, swaying in the wind and gushing out rays of light. As soon as Qin Feiyang entered the sea of flowers, he called out Lu Hong and the pangolin. When the black dragon snake saw the herbs, it was dumbfounded on the spot. There were so many herbs? No wonder Qin Feiyang and the others were so excited. For a moment, Qin Feiyang and the other two, Wolf King and the other two beasts, began to frantically sweep through the sea of flowers. Boss, come over and take a look. What kind of herb is this? Suddenly, Fatso's surprised voice sounded. Qin Feiyang walked over and looked down at the herb in Fatso's hand. His eyes immediately lit up. This medicinal herb was a finger tall. Its entire body was green and crystal clear. There were 3 cloud-shaped leaves on it, emitting a hazy radiance. Fatso urged. What exactly is it, tell me? Qin Feiyang swallowed his saliva and said. This is the spirit cloudgrass, one of the main ingredients for refining the spirit sea pill. I'll go. Fatso looked at the spirit cloudgrass with shining eyes. The spirit sea pill could be used to cultivate a shattered qi sea. As one of the main medicinal herbs, the spirit cloudgrass was definitely priceless. Qin Feiyang, I also found a fruit that I have never seen before. On the other side, Lu Hong also said at this time. Qin Feiyang hurriedly ran over and looked down. The excitement on his face could not be concealed. Chapter 663. Lu Hong looked at Qin Feiyang's expression and said with a smile, It seems that this is another precious medicinal herb. It's not just a little precious, it's very precious. This fruit is called the dragon saliva fruit. It's a medicinal herb used to refine the 9-turn dragon blood pill. And it's second only to the first-ranked dragon blood. Qin Feiyang was extremely excited. He originally thought that the 9-turn dragon blood pill's medicinal herbs could only be found in the imperial capital, but he didn't expect to find one here. He scanned the sea of flowers. It was hard to imagine how many more of these medicinal herbs there were. He came back to his senses and shouted, Quick, quick, all the medicinal herbs you haven't seen before, don't leave a single one behind. After an entire hour, the few of them finally stopped sweeping and gathered together. Qin Feiyang asked, How's the harvest? Fatso held a qiankuan bag and waved it in front of Qin Feiyang. He said with a sneaky smile, Together, it's almost half a qiankuan bag. Qin Feiyang was overjoyed when he heard this. Then he waved his hand and led everyone into the castle. He walked to the altar, opened the iron box, and took out the pill scripture. He said to Fatso and Lu Hong, Categorize the medicinal herbs. If you encounter any medicinal herbs you don't know, read the pill scripture. Pangolin, black dragon snake, stay here and help. After that, he added another sentence. Understood. The two nodded and immediately squatted on the ground, getting busy. Qin Feiyang also left the castle with Wolf King and went to the small wooden house. In front of the courtyard gate, Qin Feiyang stood respectfully and cupped his hands. Senior, I'll take my leave first. Go. When we enter the imperial capital, I'll let old man Ren inform you. The ugly old woman's voice came from the wooden house. Thank you, senior. Qin Feiyang bowed and expressed his thanks. Then he walked into a teleportation gate. Mansion Master's mansion. In the conference hall, the old man sat on the top. Wang Hong and Jiang Qianqing sat on the 2 seats below. Ren Wushuang, Lu Xingqian, Dong Zhengyang, and Shen Mei stood in the center of the hall, recounting what had happened in the Yellow Springs. Although the old master and Wang Hong had experienced the Great War of the 9 prefectures, they still couldn't help but shudder when they heard the narration of the 4 people. Whoosh! Outside the palace, a ripple suddenly appeared in the void, and Qin Feiyang and Wolf King appeared out of thin air. Brother Qin, Brother Wolf King, congratulations. That's right. Now, not only will you be able to enter the imperial capital, but you will also be famous throughout the 9 great provinces. As soon as the guards outside the hall saw the man and the wolf appear, They immediately surrounded them. Wolf King smiled proudly and said, "Are you envious?" "I'm not envious, I'm very envious. We dream of going to the imperial capital, but unfortunately, we won't have the chance in our entire lives. Brother Qin, Brother Wolf King, when you go to the imperial capital, you must work hard. Don't embarrass our spiritual state." The group of people smiled and complimented. Wolf King patted his chest and said in high spirits, "Don't worry, when we reach the imperial capital, we will still be the ones bullying them." The group of people couldn't help but laugh. However, with this man and Wolf's lawless personality, they might really turn the imperial capital upside down. "Brett, what are you doing outside? Come in quickly." At this moment, the old master's dissatisfied voice sounded in the hall. The guards surrounding Qin Feiyang and Wolf King hurriedly retreated to the side. Qin Feiyang smiled at the group of people, walked to the door, and gently pushed it open. Then he walked in and bowed. "Greetings, Mansion Master." The old master glanced at him and said, "Close the door." Qin Feiyang turned around and closed the palace door. He walked to the side of Ren Wuxuang and the others and looked at Wang Hong and Jiang Qianqing. He cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Seniors, how have you been?" "We're still the same. As for you, I heard from Wuxuang and the others that you showed off your might in the 9 Nether Underworld." Wang Hong teased. "I was lucky." Qin Feiyang laughed dryly. Wang Hong's face twitched, and he said, "Mansion Master and I were also very lucky back then. Why didn't we win?" Qin Feiyang thought for a moment and smiled awkwardly. "Maybe it's because we were a little luckier than you." Hearing this, the old master, Wang Hong, and Jiang Qianqing couldn't help but shake their heads and laugh. The old master said with a pleasant expression, "You contributed greatly to our spiritual state's great victory this time. Tell me, what reward do you want? This old man will give it to you." "Really?" Qin Feiyang said. "Nonsense, this old man always means what he says." The old master glared at him in annoyance. Wang Hong chuckled. "Qin Feiyang, you're the first person who dares to question the Mansion Master. You've got guts." Qin Feiyang laughed dryly and looked at the old master. "I want a 5th grade alchemy fire." The old master's face darkened. What kind of joke was this? The highest level of alchemy fire in the spiritual state was a 4th grade alchemy fire. How dare he ask for a 5th grade alchemy fire? Wasn't this clearly making things difficult for him? "You don't have it." Qin Feiyang couldn't help but feel disappointed. He thought for a moment and said, "Then give me 5 or 6 perfect battle arts." As soon as he said that, everyone looked at him in shock. Was this guy purposely picking a fight? The old master was so angry that his beard blew and his eyes widened. He said angrily, "Just pretend that this old man didn't say anything. The Mansion Master is acting shamelessly." "How shameless?" Wolf King mumbled. "What did you say?" The old master's eyelids twitched, and he glared at Wolf King. Wolf King picked his nose and said lazily, "Brother said that you're old but strong, unparalleled, unrivaled, and unparalleled." The old master clenched his fists and was about to go crazy. In the end, he held it in and waved his hand impatiently. All right. This old man will let you go to the treasury and choose something." "Treasury?" Qin Feiyang and Wolf King were stunned. The old master didn't explain and looked at Wang Hong. "Take them there." Ren Wuxuang glanced at Qin Feiyang and Wang Hong, and said unhappily, "Grandpa, you can't favor one and discriminate against the other." The old master looked at her, then at Lu Xingqian and the other two. "If it weren't for Qin Feiyang, would you be able to come back alive? This old man has always been fair and impartial. I will never bend the law for personal gain." Ren Wuxuang immediately lowered her head. Lu Xingqian and the other two looked at each other, and didn't even dare to breathe loudly. The old master looked at Wang Hong again and said, "Keep an eye on them. Don't let them take anything else." "Yes." Wang Hong nodded and got up to open a portal. He looked at Qin Feiyang and Wolf King and said, "Let's go. There must be a lot of treasures in the treasury." The Wolf King chuckled and rushed into the teleportation gate first. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. He followed behind Wang Hong and entered the portal under the envious gazes of Dong Jingyang and the others. The next moment, 2 people and 1 beast landed in the sky above a mountain range. Qin Feiyang scanned the area below with a surprised expression. Below, the mountains were undulating, the vegetation was lush, and a rapid river ran through the east, west, north, and south like a giant python. And right below, on the top of a mountain, sat a huge ancient castle. The ancient castle was completely black, as if a peerless beast was lying there, emitting a cold aura. Wolf King looked at the ancient castle and said in surprise, "That's the treasury?" "That's right. This is the back mountain of the Mansion Master's mansion. The 10 commanders usually cultivate here in order to protect the treasury," Wang Hong said. Qin Feiyang took a closer look. Sure enough, there were many small and exquisite wooden buildings in the mountain streams around the ancient castle. And in the small wooden buildings, he could faintly sense a powerful aura. "Let's go down." Wang Hong waved his hand and landed in front of the gate of the ancient castle with a man and a wolf. Then, Wang Hong took out a pentagonal badge and pointed it at the gate of the ancient castle. Immediately, a beam of light rushed out from the badge and entered the gate. Boom! A gap suddenly appeared on the gate, and then it slowly opened. Wolf King looked at the gate, then looked at the badge in Wang Hong's hand with shifty eyes. Wang Hong sneered. "Don't look, there are only 2 badges in total. One is on Lord Mansion Master, and the other is on me. If you have the confidence to defeat me, stop talking." Wolf King waved his claws, turned around, and rushed into the castle. Even though it had already broken through to the 2-star War Master, it was still unable to see through Wang Hong's cultivation. And Wang Hong said it with such confidence. It was obvious that he did not put it in his eyes at all. Therefore, it decisively gave up on the little scheme in its heart. Little brat. Looking at Wolf King's small back, Wang Hong could not help but shake his head and laugh. As for Wolf King, he was dumbfounded the moment he entered the castle. When Qin Feiyang entered, it was the same, his eyes filled with disbelief. Inside the huge castle, there were many tall iron shelves neatly arranged, and every iron shelf was filled with things. There were all kinds of divine weapons, iron and jade boxes of all sizes, and a large number of universe bag. These weapons were collected by the previous mansion masters. Each of them can cut through iron like mud. And these iron and jade boxes, some of them contain martial skills, some of them contain battle arts, and some of them contain pills, pill formulas, pill fires, and precious medicinal ingredients. As for those universe bag, they are all gold coins. After Wang Hong closed the door, he brought Qin Feiyang and Wolf King around the treasure trove and introduced them. Qin Feiyang stopped beside a battle sword, grabbed the hilt, and flicked the blade. Clang! Immediately, an ear-piercing sound echoed in the treasure trove. There was no noise at all. It was obviously a top-grade battle sword. Wang Hong turned to look at Qin Feiyang and laughed. "Have you taken a fancy to it?" Qin Feiyang laughed and placed the battle sword back in its original position. No matter how powerful the weapon was, how could it compare to Chang Shui? He looked at the other weapons. Although they were all good, none of them caught his eye. Next, he opened the jade and iron boxes again, but he did not choose anything, because he could no longer use the martial skills. As for the battle arts, the highest grade was only high grade, which was meaningless. As for the pill formulas, they were even more unable to attract his attention, because all the pill formulas in the Dan scripture were there. The only thing that moved him was the medicinal ingredients and the pill fire. But in the end, the pill fire was only 1st grade, 2nd grade, and 3rd grade. There wasn't even a 4th grade pill fire, let alone the 5th grade pill fire that he desired. In the end, he gave up on the pill fire and only focused on the medicinal ingredients. "What exactly do you want?" Seeing that Qin Feiyang did not make a decision, Wang Hong gradually lost his patience. One had to know. Ordinary things couldn't enter this treasure trove at all. In other words, the things that could enter this treasure trove, other than gold coins, were all valuable treasures. But looking at Qin Feiyang's current appearance, it seemed that nothing could catch his eye. "Don't worry." Qin Feiyang smiled and walked towards the deepest part of the treasure trove. After a series of observations, he discovered that the deeper he went, the more precious the items were. A moment later, He stopped in front of the innermost row of iron shelves and raised his head to scan the jade boxes on them. Very quickly, Qin Feiyang discovered something unusual. On the other iron shelves, there were dozens of jade boxes piled up on each floor. Chapter 664. There must be something fishy going on. Qin Feiyang decisively grabbed a jade box and opened it. Just as the box was opened, a cold aura surged out. Qin Feiyang's eyes immediately lit up with joy. Inside the jade box lay a strange flower the size of a baby's fist. It was completely white as if it was carved out of white bones. Wasn't this the flower of death? At the same time, the Wolf King's eyes also shone brightly as he drooled. He didn't expect that there would be such a treasure hidden in this treasure vault. Looking at Qin Feiyang and Wolf King's eyes, Wang Hong frowned slightly and asked, "Do you know what this is?" "What do you mean?" "As one of the guardians of the treasure vault, you don't know about the flower of death?" Qin Feiyang was stunned and shook his head. "I don't know. Senior, can you explain it?" "You really don't know?" Wang Hong looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. Qin Feiyang nodded. Wang Hong secretly heaved a sigh of relief and smiled. "This is just a very ordinary medicinal herb. It's not very useful." A man and a wolf looked at each other. "Flower of death is ordinary? Who are you trying to fool?" Qin Feiyang chuckled. "Senior, if you don't want me to take this flower of death away, you can just say so. Why lie to me? You know?" Wang Hong was surprised. Wolf King pursed his lips. "Of course I know. We got one in the netherworld." Wang Hong suddenly felt awkward. He really didn't want Qin Feiyang to take away the flower of death. Because the flower of death was too precious, he lied to Qin Feiyang and said that it was just an ordinary medicinal herb. But he never expected that he would end up losing the rice used to lure it. Instead, he made himself so embarrassed. Qin Feiyang glanced at Wang Hong in amusement. Then he casually grabbed another jade box. When he opened it, strands of multicolored light shot out. "Damn, this is the jade crystal flower," Wolf King exclaimed. "What? You even know about the jade crystal flower?" Wang Hong stared blankly at the man and the wolf. "Is it strange that we know?" Wolf King glanced at him indifferently and also grabbed a jade box. He opened it and immediately curled his lips in disdain. Inside the jade box was a blood ginseng. To others, the blood ginseng was a rare treasure that could only be encountered by chance, but to Wolf King, it was nothing at all. He immediately closed the lid of the box and put it back to its original position. But at this moment, Qin Feiyang suddenly frowned, stretched out his hand and said, "Let me see." Previously, when Wolf King opened the jade box, he also glanced at the blood ginseng, but didn't pay it much attention. However, just as Wolf King closed the box, he suddenly had a strange feeling. This blood ginseng seemed to be somewhat different from ordinary blood ginseng. Wolf King said disdainfully, "It's just a blood ginseng. What's there to see?" At the same time, at the side, Wang Hong stared at Qin Feiyang with a trace of nervousness in his eyes. "Cut the crap." Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at Wolf King and took the initiative to grab the jade box. Then he opened the lid and carefully looked at the blood ginseng. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang's eyes narrowed. Immediately after, his face was filled with ecstasy. The blood ginseng lay quietly in the jade box, emitting a hazy blood light. At first glance, it was no different from ordinary blood ginseng. But if one looked carefully, there was a shocking discovery. On the surface of the blood ginseng, there was a blood-colored pattern. The shape of this pattern was like a tiger. Moreover, according to Qin Feiyang's observation, there was no trace of engraving on the blood ginseng. This was enough to show that this tiger-shaped pattern was not man-made. It grew on its own. He was no stranger to this pattern. It was called the tiger-shaped spirit pattern. Only medicinal herbs that had reached 10,000 years old would give birth to this tiger-shaped spirit pattern. In other words, the blood ginseng in front of him was 10,000 years old. 10,000-year-old blood ginseng. How could this not make him excited? That was because refining the small creation pill required these 10,000 years old medicinal herbs. He originally thought that these medicinal herbs were basically impossible to find. But he did not expect to find one here. At the same time, Wang Hong, who was at the side, looked at Qin Feiyang's expression and could not help but feel weak. It was over. He must have been discovered by this brat. He really could not understand how this Qin Feiyang knew everything. One had to know. Medicinal herbs that were 10,000 years old were already peerless. Therefore, very few people in the world knew the characteristics of 10,000 years old medicinal herbs. Even when he saw this blood ginseng back then, he only knew that this was a 10,000 years old blood ginseng after hearing the old man's explanation. But Qin Feiyang could tell at a glance. Wasn't this too unbelievable? Could it be that this brat had seen it before? But that was impossible. Qin Feiyang was just a country boy. How could he have the chance to see this 10,000 years old medicinal herb? Just as Wang Hong was puzzled, Qin Feiyang closed the jade box, turned to look at Wang Hong, and said with a smile, "Senior, I want this blood ginseng." Wang Hong's face suddenly twitched. Wolf King was a little anxious and said with a voice transmission, "Little Qin Zi, you don't want the death flower and the jade crystal flower, but you want this blood ginseng. Is there something wrong with your head? You don't understand," Qin Feiyang said secretly. "What do you mean?" Wolf King frowned. Qin Feiyang said with a smile, "This is a 10,000 years old blood ginseng. It's many times more precious than the death flower and the jade crystal flower." "What? A 10,000 years old blood ginseng?" Wolf King was dumbfounded on the spot, and looked at the jade box with a dumbfounded expression. Seeing Qin Feiyang and Wolf King flirting with each other, Wang Hong could not help but frown and said, "Kid, do you want to think about it again?" Qin Feiyang said with a smile, "Senior, are you trying to trick me again? Don't waste your time, I want it." "Bastard." Wang Hong cursed under his breath and nodded helplessly. "Okay, it's the mansion master who said so. Take it." Qin Feiyang smiled and put away the iron box without hesitation. He glanced at the other jade boxes and asked suspiciously, "Senior, why are there 10,000 years old medicinal herbs here?" Wang Hong said, "It's said that the first mansion master left them behind." "I see." Qin Feiyang suddenly understood. If it was the first mansion master who collected it, then it wouldn't be anything strange. After all, the first mansion master and the first emperor existed at the same time. Then, are there any other 10,000 years old medicinal herbs here? Wolf King asked, looking at the jade boxes on the iron shelf with a green light in his eyes. Wang Hong's face darkened and he said angrily, "You've already taken the 10,000 years old blood ginseng. Why are you still asking so much?" "I'm just asking. I didn't say I wanted it. Why are you so stingy?" Wolf King pouted. "I'm stingy?" Wang Hong pointed at his nose and glared at Wolf King. However, he suddenly frowned and lowered his head in silence. Qin Feiyang and Wolf King looked at him curiously. A moment later, Wang Hong looked up at Wolf King and Qin Feiyang and said telepathically, "If you guys can agree to a request of mine, I'll make the decision in private and let you guys choose another one." The man and Wolf looked at each other with joy in their eyes. Wolf King said hurriedly, "What request? Tell us." Wang Hong said, "Give me the recipes for the potential pill and 9-melody yellow dragon pill." "What? Aren't you being too greedy?" Wolf King said angrily. Qin Feiyang's face was also filled with anger. The pill formulas of the potential pill and the 9-chew yellow dragon pill, any one of them could bring endless wealth. Wasn't he afraid of dying from overeating by asking for 2 recipes? Most importantly, this was the state capital's treasure vault. Everything here didn't belong to anyone. Even the old master, who was the mansion master, could not take it for himself. That was because this was a public asset of the entire spiritual state. But now Wang Hong was using the things here to make a deal with him? Qin Feiyang really did not expect that Wang Hong, who had always been open and aboveboard, would be so scheming. Looking at Qin Feiyang and Wolf King's expressions, Wang Hong sighed deeply and said, "I know that you guys must be thinking that I'm a greedy villain. Aren't you?" Wolf King sneered. "No." Wang Hong shook his head and said, "I'm doing this for the mansion master." Qin Feiyang frowned. What did this have to do with the old master? Wang Hong's face showed a trace of worry and said, "There are many things that you don't know. One of them is that the old master is about to step down. Qin Feiyang said, "We know about this." Wang Hong was slightly stunned and asked suspiciously, "How did you know?" Qin Feiyang said, "The previous mansion master told us." "I see." Wang Hong mumbled and asked telepathically, "Then did she tell you that the old master will be guarding the altar after stepping down?" Qin Feiyang nodded. Wolf King said impatiently, "We know all this. Just tell us, why do you want these 2 recipes?" "To help the old master enter the imperial capital. The old master has always had a wish to stay in the imperial capital and enjoy the rest of his life. But do you know? He has to wait until the next participant of the 9 states tournament wins before he can enter the imperial capital. But I don't have much confidence in the next 9 states tournament," Wang Hong said worriedly. "It can't be. Aren't there many talented people in the inner palace? For example, Murong Jing. 10 years later, her achievements won't be any worse than Dongfang Wuhan and the others," Qin Feiyang said. "I've also heard of Murong Jing. She's very talented in alchemy and cultivation. She's also very low-key. She's a good seedling. But as far as I know, she just broke through to the 2-star combat emperor not long ago. At this speed, can she break through to the War Master realm in 10 years? Wang Hong said. What? Qin Feiyang was stunned. He remembered that he and Murong Jing entered the inner palace together. Now he was already a 1-star combat emperor, but Murong Jing had just broken through to the 2-star combat emperor. Wasn't this too slow? Can she be compared to you monsters? All of you have opened the door of potential. Wang Hong rolled his eyes. Qin Feiyang couldn't help but laugh. Indeed, according to the cultivation speed of ordinary people, Murong Jing was already very outstanding. But compared to them, her talent was mediocre. So my plan is to use the potential elixir and the Juku Yellow Dragon elixir to cultivate them. As long as we have the potential elixir and the Juku Yellow Dragon elixir, the spiritual state will definitely win the 9 states tournament in 10 years. By then, the old master will be able to fulfill his wish and enter the imperial capital to enjoy his old age. Chapter 665. So that's how it is. Qin Feiyang finally understood. He cupped his hands and said, Senior, you really put in a lot of effort. I misunderstood you just now. Please forgive me. It's okay. Wang Hong waved his hand and sighed. All these years, the old man has treated me like family. Naturally, I have to do something for him. So please help me. Senior, you know how to repay kindness. The old man has been good to me. Logically, I should help you, but, at this point Qin Feiyang frowned. Wang Hong immediately promised, don't worry. I won't tell anyone about the recipe. Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment and looked at Wang Hong. This is too important. Please give me a few days to think about it. Okay. Wang Hong nodded and smiled. He also knew that this request was a bit difficult, so he didn't urge him. Qin Feiyang didn't mention the treasure selection again. After all, he didn't promise anyone. How could he bring it up? 2 people and 1 wolf walked out of the treasury one after another. Immediately, a beautiful figure entered their sight. It was Run Wushuang. After Wang Hong closed the stone door, he asked in confusion, Wushuang, why are you here? Run Wushuang bowed to Wang Hong and said, I have something to talk to Qin Feiyang about. Me? Qin Feiyang frowned slightly. He couldn't help but have an uneasy premonition. Wang Hong looked at the 2 meaningfully and smiled. Okay, you guys talk. With that, he opened a teleportation door and went to report to the old man. After the portal disappeared, Run Wushuang immediately ran to Qin Feiyang and said, Feiyang, can you tell me where my father is now? As expected, Qin Feiyang guessed that Ren Wushuang came to him because of Ren Duxing. After a moment of silence, Qin Feiyang said, Sis, it's not that I don't want to tell you about Uncle Ren's whereabouts. It's Grandpa who doesn't want me to tell you. He doesn't want you to worry. Grandpa knows too? Ren Wushuang's face froze. Qin Feiyang nodded and added, but the old man only knows that Uncle Run is still alive. He doesn't know where Uncle Run is now. Why? Run Wushuang looked at him in confusion. Qin Feiyang said, Because Uncle Ren doesn't want you to know where he is. Even so, you can't hide it from me. This is too much. After saying that, she squatted on the ground, hugged her shoulders and cried. Sis, don't be like this, okay? If others see this, they will think that I am bullying you. Qin Feiyang said helplessly. You guys are bullying me. I am not a child. Why don't you tell me? Ren Wuxuang whispered, tears falling like rain. Qin Feiyang said helplessly. Can you stop crying? Ren Wuxuang turned a deaf ear to it and silently shed tears. Her thin body was curled up there while shivering, and she seemed to be extremely helpless. Aya. Qin Feiyang, Wuxuang, what are you two doing here? At this moment, one figure after another streaked across the sky. It was third young Master Chao and the other commanders. Fan Jian was also among them. The 9 people landed on the square outside the castle and looked at the two of them curiously. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, Nothing. Is that so? Then why is Miss Wuxuang crying? Fan Jian looked at Qin Feiyang strangely. Xue Huiyan frowned and said, Qin Feiyang, did you bully Wuxuang? Third young Master Chao said with a cold face. Let me tell you, Wuxuang is the apple of our eye. If you dare to bully her, we will not forgive you. I didn't. Qin Feiyang quickly waved his hand. Wolf King stood at the side. Not only did he not help to explain, he even looked at Qin Feiyang with schadenfreude. Really? Third young Master Chao looked at him unkindly. Qin Feiyang was about to break down, and said, Sis, don't cry. If you keep crying, I won't be able to clear my name even if I jump into the Yellow River. Then do you want to tell me? Ren Wuxuang sent a sound transmission, her tone carrying a hint of threat. Qin Feiyang rubbed his aching forehead, looked at Wolf King beside him, and said angrily, Can you help me out? This is between you two, what can I say? The Wolf King said indifferently, acting as if this matter had nothing to do with him. You win. Qin Feiyang glared at it fiercely, gritted his teeth, and sent a sound transmission to Ren Wuxuang. Okay, I'll take you to see him. Really? Ren Wuxuang's delicate body trembled. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. If he did not agree, he might really be beaten up by third young Master Chao and the others. Ren Wuxuang suddenly laughed through her tears, got up, wiped her tears, and looked at Xue Huiyan and the others. He didn't bully me, just sand got into my eyes. Sand got into your eyes? The 9 people looked at each other, obviously not believing. That. Cough cough. Qin Feiyang coughed and said with a smile. Everyone, I have something to do, so I'll leave first. Then he opened a portal and left quickly with Ren Wuxuang and Wolf King. What's going on? Third young Master Chao and the others looked at each other. Iron Chain Bridge in the Land of Ruins. Whoosh. 2 people and a wolf suddenly appeared out of thin air. Ren Wuxuang looked in front of her and said in surprise, Isn't this the entrance to the Land of Ruins? That's right. Uncle Ren is down here. Qin Feiyang pointed at the canyon. Ren Wuxuang's eyes trembled, and she immediately landed on the bridge, looked down at the canyon and shouted, Father, I'm here to find you. Can you come out and see your daughter? Her voice echoed in the canyon, carrying a deep longing and desire, and did not disappear for a long time. But in the canyon, other than the whistling of the storm, no other sound could be heard. Father, I know you don't want to see me, don't want me to know you're here. You must have your reasons, but have you ever thought about my feelings? Ever since you left, I've been looking for you every day. To find you, I even stayed in the Land of Ruins for more than 20 years. Do you think it was easy for me? But even so, I have never complained, because I know that this is what we should do as children. But what about you? Have you ever fulfilled the responsibility of a father? If you don't have this ability, why did you give birth to me? The more Ren Wuxuang spoke, the more emotional she became. In the end, she was almost screaming, and tears flowed like a spring. Qin Feiyang, who was standing at the back, could not help but let out a long sigh. He walked to Ren Wuxuang's side, looked down at the canyon and said, Uncle Ren, we're about to go to the imperial capital. Before we leave, you should come out and see your sister. Ren Wuxuang shouted, Yes, come out, I promise, I won't ask anything. Shuang, or why are you doing this? A moment later, A long sigh sounded in the canyon. Then, a black shadow swept out of the storm and landed on the iron chain bridge. It was Run Duxing. "Father, it's really you." Looking at the familiar face, Run Wushuang's eyes trembled, and tears flowed down her face. She immediately ran up the iron chain bridge and went straight to Run Duxing. Run Duxing's eyes were full of love, and he opened his arms. When his daughter went into his arms, his eyes couldn't help but moisten. "Father, I missed you so much," Ren Wushuang murmured. The familiar breath, the warm embrace, made her feel the fatherly love she had not felt for a long time. But hearing this, Ren Duxing was full of guilt. He whispered, "Shuang, father has wronged you. Can you forgive father?" "I've never blamed father." Ren Wushuang shook her head. Ren Duxing's nose was sour, and 2 drops of old tears finally came out of his eyes. Wolf King looked at the father and daughter and murmured, "Little Qinzi, are you jealous?" Who wouldn't be jealous of such a family? But not everyone can have it. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he looked up at the sky with a very complicated look in his eyes. After a while, he retracted his gaze, glanced at Ren Duxing, waved his hand, and took Wolf King into the castle. Looking at Fatso and Lu Hong, who were still busy, Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "How is it going?" Fatso wiped the sweat on his forehead and said with a smile, "There are too many. It will take at least until tomorrow to sort it out." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, "Then put it down first." "What's wrong?" Lu Hong was puzzled. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "We are going to the capital soon. I think it's time to tell you some things." Lu Hong and Fatso looked at each other, immediately put down the medicinal materials in their hands, got up and looked at Qin Feiyang. Luo Qianxue and Lin Yi also opened their eyes one after another. Qin Feiyang looked at Lin Yi and said with a smile, "Haven't you always wanted to know my origin? Now I will tell you that I was indeed born in the capital." Lin Yi's delicate body trembled, but she quickly calmed down and waited for the following words. Qin Feiyang's gaze swept across everyone, and the black dragon snake. He smiled and said, "My father is someone you all know, the current emperor of the great Qin Empire." "What?" Lin Yi and Luo Qianxue suddenly got up and looked at Qin Feiyang in disbelief. There were stormy waves in their hearts. The black dragon snake was also shocked to the extreme. As for Wolf King, Pangolin, Fatso, and Lu Hong, they were not surprised because they already knew this. The only thing they wanted to know was why Qin Feiyang came to the Iron Ox town. After a long while, Luo Qianxue recovered and asked, "Are you really the son of the emperor?" "Of course." Qin Feiyang smiled and said. Hearing this, Luo Qianxue looked up and down at Qin Feiyang. Then she actually knelt on the ground. Qin Feiyang's face changed. He hurriedly went up to hold Luo Qianxue and frowned. "Auntie Xue, what are you doing?" Luo Qianxue said in a panic. "You are the prince, of course I have to salute." Qin Feiyang smiled helplessly and said, "Auntie Xue, aren't you treating me like this? Don't be like this, and now I'm no longer a prince." "Not a prince?" Luo Qianxue was taken aback and wondered, why? Qin Feiyang smiled self-deprecatingly and said, "As early as more than 10 years ago, the emperor had already ordered to abolish my identity as a prince. If it weren't for my mother to plead for me, I'm afraid I would have already turned into a pile of soil." "What?" Luo Qianxue and Lin Yi were stunned. Fatso and the others were also trembling physically and mentally. It turned out that all this was related to the emperor. No wonder every time Qin Feiyang's father was mentioned, Qin Feiyang would be furious. However, why did the emperor order to abolish his son? Chapter 666. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and smiled faintly. "My talent was not bad back then. I suddenly became a 9-star martial master when I was 10 years old." A 9-star martial master at the age of 10? Lin Yi's face froze. This talent is not only not bad, it is simply monstrous. But this is even more strange. Qin Feiyang has such amazing talent. It can be said that his future is limitless, but the current emperor actually poisoned him. Is he stupid? Wolf King frowned and asked, "Little Qinzi, what is the reason?" Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, "I don't know the reason." "You don't know?" Wolf King, Fatso, and others looked at each other. Qin Feiyang said, I remember that when I had a conflict with the eldest prince, my eldest brother, he killed me and seriously injured me. Upon hearing this, Fatso said angrily, as the eldest brother, he actually killed you. Isn't this too much? What's more, aren't you a 9-star martial master? Why can't you beat him? Haven't you heard of this saying? The most ruthless imperial family. In the imperial palace, there is no kinship at all, only power struggles. And the eldest prince is 8 or 9 years older than me. At that time he was already a 5-star martial ancestor. I am a 9-star martial master. No matter how heaven-defying I am, I can't be his opponent. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled bitterly. Fatso suddenly said, I see. You continue. Speak slowly. Don't get too excited. Do I look excited to you? Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at him. In the past, he was indeed very aggrieved and angry. Every night, he was awakened by nightmares. But now he figured it out. Whatever happened, no matter how much you resent or hate it, it is impossible to change anything. Only by facing it with strength, optimism, and courage can you live more at ease. In short, you can't let the past affect your heart. Gathering his thoughts, Qin Feiyang continued. Although the injuries I suffered that time were very serious, the imperial palace did not lack top-grade healing pills. I woke up the next morning. But not long after I woke up, misfortune befell me. When he said the last sentence, Qin Feiyang's tone obviously changed. Fatso and the others also held their breaths, waiting for Qin Feiyang to continue. After I woke up, I was still reading the historical records in the pavilion outside the bedroom as usual. I remember that it was a rainy day. Just as I was engrossed in the movie, 4 of my father's personal bodyguards suddenly appeared and threatened to kill me. At that time, I wasn't mentally prepared at all. I was stunned. Father has always doted on me. How could he kill me? Besides, I didn't do anything wrong. But the 4 guards didn't explain anything. They pulled out their butcher's knives and slashed at my head. Qin Feiyang said his hands couldn't help but clench. Although more than 10 years had passed, every scene and face at that time was clearly imprinted in his mind. At the same time, Fatso and the others couldn't help but feel cold all over. Killing without any reason. Was the emperor really so heartless? Lu Hong asked. And then? Of course I wasn't willing. Even if you want me to die, shouldn't you let me die with a clear understanding? I didn't hesitate to call for help from my mother. My mother is very strong. She rushed over in an instant and stopped the 4 guards. But at the same time my father also came. But that kind face was no longer there. It was all indifference. Especially the way he looked at me. That kind of ruthless coldness, I still can't forget it. And no matter how I asked, he didn't say a word. Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice, his eyes as sharp as a blade. Fatso said, What about your mother? My mother didn't know the reason. She also asked, but he just wouldn't say. He was determined to kill me. My mother is the person who loves me the most. Of course she wouldn't allow him to do so. In a rage, she was ready to take me away from the imperial palace. Qin Feiyang said. Lu Hong said. Where to? Qin Feiyang said. My mother's family. Because my grandfather has the ability to protect me. Is your grandfather very strong? Wolf King was surprised. Very strong. But I'm not very sure how strong he is. After all, I was still young at that time. And I've only seen him once since I was young. And it was when I was 5 years old. Now I don't even remember what he looks like. However, I heard from my mother that my grandfather's family is a hidden family. They are very powerful, and even the emperor has to be courteous to them. Qin Feiyang said. Damn, your background is so strong. Fatso was dumbfounded. Not only did he have a mother who was the empress, but he also had a grandfather who even the emperor was afraid of. This was simply awesome. Since your grandfather is so strong, why didn't he come to save you back then? Lu Hong was suspicious. Qin Feiyang said. I heard from my mother that my grandfather's family is very far from the imperial palace. At that time, things happened so suddenly that there was no time to inform him. Lu Hong asked. In the end, how did you escape? Upon hearing this question, Qin Feiyang's body and mind suddenly trembled. He closed his eyes, and his face was full of pain. 2 drops of tears even flowed from the corners of his eyes. Lu Hong and the others fell silent and didn't disturb him, because at a glance, they knew that this story was Qin Feiyang's greatest pain. After a long time, Qin Feiyang opened his eyes and sighed. It was my mother who begged the emperor. At that time, my mother was ready to take me away from the imperial palace, but the emperor stopped her and fought with my mother. The emperor was stronger than my mother. In the end, my mother was seriously injured by him. Helpless, my mother knelt on the ground and begged him. Qin Feiyang clenched his hands together tightly, and his eyes were red. When he thought of the scene of his mother kneeling to the emperor in order to save him, his heart was bleeding. He could be killed. He could be humiliated. But humiliating his mother was out of the question. Phew. After a while, Qin Feiyang exhaled a long breath and calmed the anger in his heart. In the end, under my mother's bitter pleading, the emperor changed his mind and didn't kill me. However, he wanted to abolish my cultivation and expel me from the imperial capital, never to return. Moreover, my mother was not allowed to come to me. This is the details of my encounter. After telling this story, Qin Feiyang felt a lot more relaxed. Brother Feiyang. Lin Yi looked at Qin Feiyang with tears streaming down her face. She never thought that Qin Feiyang had such an unbearable past. He must have had a hard time these years. Child, don't be sad. Although you have lost a lot, you have also gained a lot. Look at Wolf King Fatso and Lu Hong. They are all your companions. Luo Qianxue stepped forward and comforted him softly. Qin Feiyang glanced at them one by one and bowed. Thank you for your company over the years. Why are you so polite to us? Are you asking for a beating? Wolf King glared at him fiercely. Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed. Fatso suddenly said, Boss, have you ever thought about whether this matter has anything to do with the eldest prince? And Qin Feiyang was taken aback. On the first day, you had a conflict with the eldest prince. But on the second day, the emperor, who has always loved you, turned against you. Why does Fat Lord feel that something is wrong? Fatso frowned. It should have nothing to do with him. That's because he was the one who injured me, not the other way around. Moreover, he was the one who provoked me first. If it really happened because of this, the emperor should punish him. Qin Feiyang said. That's true. Fatso nodded, frowning. He was puzzled. As for the reason, I will slowly investigate it when I enter the imperial capital. Now, I am telling these things not to win your sympathy, but to let you understand my next situation. Qin Feiyang said. Wolf King raised his eyebrows and said, What do you mean? I don't even know if I can survive this trip to the imperial capital. You are all my friends, even my family. I don't want to implicate you. So I hope that you won't go to the imperial capital. Qin Feiyang's face had a trace of pleading. Fuck. Are we the kind of people who are afraid of death? You treat us as friends, and we treat you as friends. Between friends, shouldn't we enjoy joys and sorrows together? Let me tell you, if you say such things again, don't blame us for falling out with you. Fatso and Wolf King said angrily. Lu Hong's brows were tightly knitted, and she was a little unhappy. Qin Feiyang sighed. I don't want to lose you. We don't want to see you fight alone. Anyway, I must go to the imperial capital. You can't stop me even if you want to. Wolf King smiled coldly. Yes. Fatso nodded and snorted. You want to enjoy glory and wealth alone? Dream on. Qin Feiyang looked at the man and the wolf. He was quite angry, but more than that he was touched. In life, one didn't need too many friends, as long as they were sincere. Luo Qianxue glanced at them and said with a smile, Feiyang, if you really treat them as friends, don't say such things in the future, because it will only hurt their hearts. Qin Feiyang looked at Luo Qianxue and couldn't help but frown. Okay, don't say anything. Let them go. If you really leave them in the spiritual state, they won't be able to cultivate in peace. Besides, I don't feel at ease leaving them here. Because except for you, no one can restrain them. At that time, I don't know what trouble they will cause. As for me, it's better not to go. With my little strength, I will only be a burden to you if I go. Luo Qianxue shook her head and smiled. Aunt Shui. Qin Feiyang's eyes were a little wet. In fact, he was most worried about Luo Qianxue, because Luo Qianxue was really good to him. He didn't want this woman who was like a mother to be hurt. Originally, he didn't know how to say it. But he didn't expect Luo Qianxue to be so considerate and bring it up herself. Then, he looked at Fatso and the others. Looking at the stubbornness and persistence on their faces, he sighed deeply and said with a smile, "As long as you are not afraid of death, then go." TSK, Fat Lord even dares to enter the tiger's den, let alone the imperial capital? Fatso had a look of disdain. Keep bragging. Wolf King rolled his eyes at him, turned to Qin Feiyang, and said with a sneaky smile, "Hee, I am still waiting to be the guardian beast of the great Qin Empire. You guys?" Chapter 667. Then, Qin Feiyang looked at Yi again. At this moment, she was lowering her head and grabbing her belt tightly with both hands. Her eyes were filled with struggle. Qin Feiyang didn't say anything. She needed to make this decision herself. He looked at the black dragon snake and the pangolin and asked, "Are you guys going?" "Of course," the pangolin said without hesitation. After tasting the benefits of opening the door of potential, it had already made up its mind to follow these fiends for the rest of its life. But the black dragon snake hesitated. Suddenly, it looked at Qin Feiyang and cautiously asked, "If this emperor says I'm not going, will you kill me to silence me?" Qin Feiyang laughed. "Although you and I haven't been together for long, I respect your choice, not to mention that my original intention was for you to stay in the spirit state. If that's the case then..." The black dragon snake struggled for a moment and gritted its teeth. "At most, I'll die, I'll go." It was taking a gamble. Although this trip to the imperial capital pointed to disaster, it was still an opportunity. If Qin Feiyang really became the emperor of the great Qin Empire, then it would be a meritorious minister. Wouldn't it have a meteoric rise in the future? Qin Feiyang smiled and looked at Lu Hong and Fatso. "Continue to organize the herbs." The two nodded. Then Qin Feiyang appeared at the bridge with Wolf King and looked up at Ren Duxing and Ren Wushuang. The father and daughter stood on the iron chain bridge, talking and laughing, looking exceptionally warm. Sensing Qin Feiyang's aura, Ren Duxing also looked at Qin Feiyang and nodded with a smile. Qin Feiyang also revealed a smile. Then, Ren Duxing looked down at Ren Wushuang and smiled. "Shuang, or you should go back." Ren Wushuang's expression changed and she hurriedly said, "But I still want to accompany father for a while." Ren Duxing rubbed Ren Wushuang's head lovingly and said with a smile, "Silly boy, won't you have another chance in the future?" But Ren Wushuang still wanted to say something. Ren Duxing shook his head and said with a smile, "Don't hesitate. You've grown up now. You should understand that all good things must come to an end." Ren Wushuang pouted, feeling wronged, and said, "Then can you tell me why you're staying here?" "No. Didn't you just say that you won't ask anything?" Ren Duxing smiled. "All right." Ren Wushuang lowered his head, his eyes filled with reluctance. Alas! Seeing this, Ren Duxing couldn't help but sigh inwardly. With a wave of his hand, he swept up Ren Wushuang and flew towards Qin Feiyang and Wolf King. Several breaths later, the father and daughter landed at the end of the bridge, but Ren Duxing did not leave the iron chain bridge. "Uncle Ren." Qin Feiyang bowed. Ren Duxing sized up Qin Feiyang and nodded. "You broke through to 1-star War Master so quickly, not bad." Qin Feiyang laughed. "Uncle Ren's strength is also unfathomable. Before long, I can only look up to you." Ren Duxing shook his head and laughed. He lowered his head and looked at Ren Wushuang, who was beside him, and said, "Shuang, I have some personal matters to discuss with Qin Feiyang. You should leave first." Ren Wushuang frowned and said angrily, "You have something to hide from me again. What do you take me for?" Ren Duxing said, "Shuang, don't be willful. Father didn't let you know for your own good." "Humph." Ren Wushuang coldly snorted, walked down the iron chain bridge, and walked into the distance. Before leaving, she glared fiercely at Qin Feiyang. "Who did I offend?" Qin Feiyang was a little depressed. After Ren Wuxuang walked away, Ren Duxing said apologetically, Feiyang, this girl of mine is like this, don't mind her. Do I dare to mind? Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly, sorted out his emotions and asked suspiciously, Uncle Ren, what are you trying to say? Ren Duxing asked, how many people won the 9 regions war this time? Let me think. Wan Qiu, Feng Wuxia, the twin sisters Ling Yu and the other 3, Tan Wu. Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment, and said, if we don't count the people from our spirit state, there are a total of 9 people. Ren Duxing said, then who are the people from our spirit state? Qin Feiyang said, Lu Xingqian, Dong Zhenyang's sister Xinmei. Ren Duxing pondered for a moment and asked, then do you feel that there is something wrong with anyone? Something wrong? Qin Feiyang thought carefully for a moment and said, if there is something wrong, it is only Lu Xingqian. What do you mean? Ren Duxing was surprised. First, he is hiding his cultivation level. At first we all thought he was a 7 stars combat emperor, but in the end, I found that he is stronger than us, a 3-star combat grandmaster. Second, in the 9 Nether Yellow Springs he secretly helped the people of Kong and Yuzhou several times. Third, he seems to know everything, no matter what he encounters he knows. Qin Feiyang said. Ren Duxing frowned. Why would he help the people of Kong and Yuzhou? I don't know. I asked but he didn't say but, when Qin Feiyang said this his eyebrows also furrowed. Ren Duxing asked, but what? He told me that he means me no harm, and he also said that he owes me a favor. But I really can't remember when I helped him. Qin Feiyang was confused. You single-handedly destroyed the Lu family, he should hate you. It seems that there is something wrong with this person. Ren Duxing muttered and said, Feiyang, Uncle Ren has a request. What is it? Qin Feiyang was confused. Do you remember that I told you that among the people who participated in the 9 states battle, there is a high chance that Mu Tianyang's lackeys are among them? Ren Duxing said in a deep voice. Qin Feiyang's pupils shrank and he said in surprise, you mean this person is Lu Xingqian? I don't know, but he is the most worthy of our attention. So I want to ask you to do everything possible to grasp his whereabouts after entering the imperial capital. Ren Duxing said. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, Uncle Ren, to be honest, I really don't want to care about these things. Ren Duxing was silent for a moment and said, Feiyang, I know this will put a lot of pressure on you, but I really can't find a suitable person. Qin Feiyang sighed helplessly and said, well, I'll do my best. Just do your best. Ren Duxing smiled and said, remember, inform me as soon as you have any news. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded. Ren Duxing waved his hand and said, then go work hard and help me take care of Shuang-Er. I will, goodbye. Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and said goodbye, then turned and walked toward Ren Wuxuang. Whoosh. Ren Duxing looked at the 2 people and the wolf, then jumped into the canyon and disappeared in the storm. During the whole process, Wolf King didn't say a word, as if it was thinking about something. After walking for a while it said, Little Qinzi, I don't know if you want to hear something. What is it? Qin Feiyang was stunned and puzzled. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. We can cooperate with Mu Tianyang and use him to destroy your enemy in the imperial capital. Wolf King said, a cold light flashing in its eyes. Not bad, you know how to use your brain to think. Qin Feiyang looked at it in surprise and shook his head. But I won't do that, because cooperating with Mu Tianyang is tantamount to asking a tiger for its skin. Moreover, his goal is to destroy the Great Qin Empire, and I just want revenge. Wolf King asked, when the time comes, what if he really wants to destroy the Great Qin Empire? Public is public, private is private. I won't sit back and do nothing. Because no matter what happens, the power of the bloodline flowing in my body will never change. No one can take away the empire of the Great Qin Empire. Qin Feiyang said, his voice sonorous and powerful. Wolf King's pupils contracted. Qin Feiyang's last sentence really gave it a big fright. It seemed that there was bound to be a bloody storm in the future. Feiyang, where is my father? At this time, Ren Wuxuang ran over and asked anxiously. Qin Feiyang turned his head to look at the empty iron chain bridge, and said with a smile, he should have left. Left. Run Wushuang's face froze and she said angrily. He didn't even say goodbye to me. Does he still care about me, his daughter? Qin Feiyang sighed. Okay, don't complain, Uncle Ren doesn't have it easy. Run Wushuang frowned, looked up and down Qin Feiyang for a moment and said, Brother, tell me the truth. Do you know everything about my father? What is it? Qin Feiyang looked confused. Run Wushuang's forehead suddenly creased a row of black lines, and she said angrily, Stop pretending, tell me, why did he stay here? Oh my God, I really don't know. If you want to know, go ask your father. Don't pester me all the time, okay? Qin Feiyang was helpless to the extreme. If he was willing to tell me, why would I ask you? Run Wushuang complained, grabbed Qin Feiyang's arm, and said with a smile, Feiyang, can you just tell sister? If the hard way didn't work, then she would use the soft way. But Qin Feiyang didn't fall for it at all. He forcefully pried Run Wushuang's fingers away, opened a teleportation door, and rushed in without looking back. Brat, I'm not done with you. Run Wushuang stomped her feet angrily and immediately chased in. Prefecture City. East City Treasure Pavilion. In the lounge. This brat is back, why didn't he come to find me? Do I have to take the initiative to find him every time? He really doesn't know how to respect the old and love the young. Yin Yuanming paced back and forth in the room, looking extremely anxious. This brat was naturally referring to Qin Feiyang. Not long after Qin Feiyang returned, he received the news and immediately returned to the lounge to wait. Of course, he wasn't missing Qin Feiyang, but those top-grade pills. But after waiting for so long, Qin Feiyang didn't come, and he couldn't help but feel resentment in his heart. Bastard, bastard! He cursed angrily and took out the image crystal. Swish. But at this moment, two people and a wolf appeared in the lounge out of thin air. Yin Yuanming was stunned. He turned his head and his face immediately surged with ecstasy. Who else could it be but Qin Feiyang? He immediately went up and said with a smile, Brother Qin, you're back. Why didn't you inform me? I could have gone to welcome you. Old fox, if you want the pills, just say it. Don't be so hypocritical, okay? Wolf King picked his nose and said disdainfully. Yin Yuanming's expression froze, and he said angrily, What are you talking about? Let me tell you, Wolf Cub, my feelings for Brother Qin can be witnessed by heaven and earth. Qin Feiyang's face twitched. He even used heaven and earth as a witness. This old fox was really going all out for the pills. You're bragging. Wolf King glanced at Yin Yuanming disdainfully and jumped to the ground. He knocked here and there, as if he was looking for something. Stop looking, there's no treasure here. Chapter 668. Qin Feiyang walked to the side of the tea table and sat on the chair. Yin Yuanming also went forward, picked up the teapot and poured tea, completely ignoring Run Wushuang beside him. Run Wushuang frowned and said, Stewardine, is my presence so insignificant? Yin Yuanming was stunned. He turned his head and his face changed slightly. He hurriedly said, Oh, isn't this Miss Run? When did you come? Qin Feiyang just picked up the teacup and took a sip. When he heard this, he directly spat it out. What kind of eyesight did this old fox have? She had been standing there for a long time, and actually didn't notice? It seemed that Yin Yuanming was going to offend this Mississippi. As expected, Ren Wushuang's face suddenly darkened. She clenched her jade-like hands and stared fiercely at Yin Yuanming. Cough, cough. Qin Feiyang coughed and kindly reminded him, She came with me. What? Yin Yuanming suddenly changed color and smiled apologetically. Miss Run, I'm sorry, it's all my fault, please sit down. Humph. Run Wushuang snorted coldly and sat opposite Qin Feiyang. Her face was very ugly. What is this great aunt doing here? Yin Yuanming was puzzled. He secretly wiped his sweat, turned around and walked to the side of the tea table, and warmly greeted her. Qin Feiyang put down the teacup and said with a faint smile, Don't be so polite, let's talk business. Business? Yin Yuanming was stunned and said suspiciously, Aren't you here to deliver the elixir? You only have eyes for the elixir? Qin Feiyang frowned. Nonsense, I'm a businessman. Naturally, I'm talking business. Do you think I'll talk about love with you? Yin Yuanming rolled his eyes. Qin Feiyang's face twitched and said helplessly, I just came back and didn't have time to refine the elixir. Now I'm here to ask you for a favor. What is it? Yin Yuanming put down the teacup and looked at him suspiciously. Qin Feiyang said, I have a very important person that I want to keep in your treasure pavilion. Who? Yin Yuanming asked. Her name is Luo Qianxue. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and Luo Qianxue instantly appeared out of thin air. Luo Qianxue bowed and said, Greetings, manager. You're welcome, you're welcome. Yin Yuanming waved his hands repeatedly. What a joke. This brat had already said that this woman was very important to him. How could he still dare to put on airs? After sizing up Luo Qianxue for a moment, Yin Yuanming turned to look at Qin Feiyang. He frowned and said, Brother Qin, based on our relationship, I will definitely help you with this small matter. But you also know that my treasure pavilion is a place to do business. Don't worry about it. Auntie Shui was the pavilion master of the precious treasure pavilion in Iron Ox Town. Later on, he even managed the treasure pavilion in Yen City. Aunt Shui knows the tricks of Zhenbao Pavilion like the back of her hand. Qin Feiyang said with a faint smile. Yin Yuanming was stunned and said with a smile, So she is one of us. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, I wonder if you have heard of Jiang Jingyi? Of course I have. He was the previous chief pavilion master of the Yen County. He was very responsible and very capable. Our chief pavilion master even planned to transfer him to the state capital. Unfortunately, he died young. Yin Yuanming sighed. Qin Feiyang said, Auntie Shui was his wife. What? Yin Yuanming suddenly stood up and looked at Luo Qianxue in disbelief. He asked, You are husband and wife? Yes. Luo Qianxue nodded, looking a little disappointed. I didn't expect to meet Jiang Jingyi's widow. Okay. I will go to the chief pavilion master later and arrange a position for you, Yin Yuanming said. Thank you. Luo Qianxue bowed and thanked him. I said you don't have to be so polite. Putting aside the relationship with Qin Feiyang, just talking about Jiang Jingyi, we have to take good care of you. Yin Yuanming smiled. Qin Feiyang said, You said it. If I am in the capital and hear that Auntie Shui is wronged, I will not forgive you. Yin Yuanming straightened his back and said, Okay, if that day comes, I will let you do whatever you want. Thank you. Qin Feiyang stood up and cupped his hands to thank him. If he wanted to keep Luo Qianxue in the spiritual state, he had to arrange a place for her. And Zhenbao Pavilion in the capital was undoubtedly the best place. He could rest assured if she stayed here. Yin Yuanming smiled and said, Brother Qin, we are done talking about Luo Qianxue. Shall we talk about the elixir now? Qin Feiyang said, Okay, give me a price. I will make it right away. So straightforward. Yin Yuanming was stunned. Then he was overjoyed and said with a smile, Then I will say it. 3,000 red fire glaze elixirs, 500 potential elixirs, and 100,000 each of the other supreme grade elixirs. Qin Feiyang's face darkened, and his veins bulged. Wasn't this an exorbitant demand? I say, are you looking for trouble? Wolf King also looked at Yin Yuanming with bad intentions. Don't misunderstand. We will provide all the herbs ourselves. You are only responsible for making the elixirs. Yin Yuanming said. Ha! Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned and frowned. Do you have so many herbs for potential elixirs and red fire glaze elixirs? Of course. To tell you the truth, the chief pavilion master has long expected that you will definitely enter the capital in the end. So, in the years when you participated in the Battle of the 9 States, the chief pavilion master personally went to the other 8 states to collect a large number of herbs. Yin Yuanming smiled sinisterly. Qin Feiyang and Wolf King looked at each other. They didn't expect the chief pavilion master to be even crazier than them. Qin Feiyang joked. Aren't you afraid that the prefecture masters of the other 8 states will find trouble with you after learning about this? We bought it with money openly. What right do they have to find trouble with us? Yin Yuanming was disdainful. You guys are awesome. Qin Feiyang gave them a thumbs up and said with a smile, But you also know my rules. The elixirs refined must be divided equally between us. This. Yin Yuanming frowned and said with a flattering smile, Brother Qin, you are going to the capital soon and may not come back in this life. Can you give us a discount? What's more, our friendship is so deep. Can you just treat it as a farewell gift to us before we part ways? He added. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and stretched out 3 fingers. 30, 70. This is my bottom line. Deal. Yin Yuanming nodded decisively. After all, after being together for so long, he knew Qin Feiyang very well. It was impossible for him to help the treasure pavilion refine elixirs for free. Therefore, he was already very satisfied to be able to negotiate a 30-70 split. Boom. At this time, a powerful aura suddenly descended over the city. At this moment, everyone in the city was alarmed. In the resting room, Qin Feiyang and the others were also bewildered. Boom. Following closely, another terrifying aura descended over the city one after another. Ren Wuxia frowned and said, Could it be that someone from the capital came to pick us up? No. It was the previous prefecture master who took you to the capital. The capital will not send anyone personally. Besides, no one from the capital will come if nothing particularly important happens. Besides, although these auras are powerful, they are still a lot worse than the people from the capital. According to my deduction, they should be at the same level as the prefecture master. Yin Yuanming said. At the same level as Grandpa. Ren Wuxia pondered for a while and said in surprise, Could it be the prefecture masters of the other 8 states? It's possible. Yin Yuanming nodded and frowned. But why did he come to our spiritual state? Qin Feiyang said. It should be for me. You. Yin Yuanming was suspicious. Qin Feiyang said with a faint smile. I killed many of their people in the 9 levels of hell, and even wiped out several states. Yin Yuanming looked at him in a daze and shook his head with a wry smile. He is indeed a ferocious guy. Don't worry, with the prefecture master here, they won't dare to do anything to you. I'll go get the herbs now. After saying that, Yin Yuanming turned around and strode out of the lounge. After watching Yin Yuanming leave, Wolf King's eyes flashed coldly and said, Little Qinzi, do you want to take the opportunity to go to Yunzhou? What do you mean? Qin Feiyang frowned. Wolf King sneered and said, Fatso's blood feud, have you forgotten? Of course not. Qin Feiyang said. What are you talking about? What blood feud does Fatso have? Ren Wuxia looked at the man and Wolf in confusion. Wolf King smiled mysteriously and said, Little girl Ren, there are some things you'd better not know. You? Ren Wuxia was about to get angry when Qin Feiyang said, Sister, can you help me see if the prefecture master of Yunzhou is here? Ren Wuxia snorted and said, You don't want to tell me. Why should I help you? If you don't go, I will. It's no big deal. Wolf King smiled disdainfully, asked Qin Feiyang for 2 portals, and left directly. Bastard, wolf cub. Ren Wuxia stomped her feet in anger and glared at Qin Feiyang. She said, If you don't tell me why my father stayed in the ruins, I'll keep pestering you. It doesn't matter. It's quite eye-catching to have a beautiful woman by my side. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. You're shameless. Ren Wuxia said angrily, gnashing her teeth and glaring at him. Qin Feiyang didn't mind and smiled. Tap tap. With the sound of footsteps, Yin Yuanming came back with a qiankuan bag in his hand. He glanced around the room and asked suspiciously, Where's Ruffian Wolf? Qin Feiyang said. He went to ask for information. Oh. Yin Yuanming nodded and handed the qiankuan bag to Qin Feiyang. He said with a smile, When can I get the elixir? Qin Feiyang glanced at the medicinal herbs in the qiankuan bag and put them into the castle. He said with a faint smile, When it's done, I'll get someone to send it to you. Okay. Yin Yuanming nodded repeatedly with a smile on his face. Swish. At this time, Wolf King appeared out of thin air and said, That old witch is here. She's now in the old master's meeting hall. Okay. She's here to settle the score with us, so we'll go and raid her nest. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with a sharp light. Feiyang, although the Yunzhou prefecture governor is not here, there are still 10 commanders. Fatso's enemies are also very strong. It's better to be careful. Luo Qianxue reminded. Qin Feiyang said. Aunt Shui, I know. Chapter 669. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded, grabbed Luo Qianxue's hand, and said, Auntie Shui, when I go to the capital, I won't come to see you. You must take care of yourself. I will. Don't worry and go on an adventure. Luo Qianxue smiled, but her eyes were wet. After being together for so long, she had long regarded Qin Feiyang as her own son. Now that they had parted, she didn't know when they would be reunited. Seeing this, Qin Feiyang couldn't help but feel sad and said, When I settle down in the capital, I will definitely come back to pick you up. Okay. I'll wait for you. Luo Qianxue nodded, feeling gratified. She really couldn't figure out why the emperor wanted to harm such a sensible child. I'm leaving. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he resolutely let go of Luo Qianxue's hand, opened a portal, and left with Wolf King. Bastard, don't think about leaving me behind. Ren Wuxia said angrily, and was about to chase after him. But at this time, Luo Qianxue grabbed her wrist, shook her head, and said with a smile, Child, don't chase after him. Feiyang is a very trustworthy person. Since he promised your father, no matter how you pester him, he won't say anything. Ren Wuxia said anxiously, but Luo Qianxue smiled and said, Okay, stop talking. Stay here and chat with me. Okay. Ren Wuxia nodded, but in her heart, she cursed Qin Feiyang for being a bastard. Yin Yuanming, who was next to them, looked surprised. Didn't Ren Wuxia's father die a long time ago? But from their conversation, why was it that this Ren Duxing was still alive? Also, Qin Feiyang and Ruffian Wolf actually wanted to raid the Yinzhou Mansion Master's lair. Were they really not afraid of death? No. All the medicinal materials are with them. They can't die in Yinzhou. Muttering to himself, Yin Yuanming looked up at Ren Wuxia and smiled. I have something to discuss with the Chief Pavilion Master. You guys take your time. Without waiting for their response, he hurriedly left. Meanwhile, in the sky above a valley in the cloud state, swish, Qin Feiyang and Wolf King appeared out of thin air. The valley was surrounded by mountains on all sides, and there were no entrances or exits. One could only enter from a high altitude. Within the valley, it was about half a mile long. The ground was very flat and covered with lush green weeds. Between the bushes, there were also wild flowers in full bloom, their fragrance assailing their nostrils. Furthermore, there was a clear stream that meandered through the entire valley. From time to time, a small fish would jump out, adding some liveliness to the valley. In the east of the valley, there was a small forest. The trees were not tall, but they were lush and full of life. Through the gaps between the leaves, he could faintly see an old wooden building. Behind the small wooden building, there was a cemetery that emitted a sorrowful aura. Qin Feiyang glanced at the valley and waved his hand. Fatso immediately appeared beside him. He had heard the conversation between Qin Feiyang and Wolf King in the castle, so he was already prepared. At this moment, looking at the valley below, his entire body suddenly exuded a sense of sorrow and a dense killing intent, because this was the place where his father and family were buried. Who is it? Suddenly, a vigilant shout sounded. Whoosh. Following closely, accompanied by the sound of something breaking through the air, an old man in black rushed out of the valley and landed in front of the two men and the wolf. The old man was skinny and had white hair. His eyes were extremely gloomy, but when he saw Fatso, it was as if an iceberg had melted. His old face was full of smiles. Fatso said, Uncle Hai, I'm back. That's right. This person was the housekeeper of the Situ family, Situ Hai. Situ Hai walked in front of Fatso and reached out his trembling hand to touch Fatso's face. He said, Child, it's been a few years since we last met. How have you been these years? Very good. Fatso nodded repeatedly and said with a smile, Uncle Hai, let me tell you a piece of good news. I've passed the Great Nine States battle. What? Situ Hai's old body trembled. He said in surprise, You're not lying to me? Why would I lie to you? I'll be able to enter the imperial capital soon. Fatso said, Haha. The heavens didn't destroy my Situ family. Situ Hai immediately looked up to the sky and laughed, tears flowing down his old face. Back then, when the Situ family was exterminated, he was so desperate, thinking that the Situ family would never be able to return to the past. However, he never expected that the child with the worst talent and the least hope would not only succeed in turning the tide and transform into a one-in-a-million genius, but he also completed the Great Nine States battle and obtained the qualification to enter the imperial capital. In his heart, a raging flame of hope was ignited. Sooner or later, the Situ family would rise again and even surpass the glory of the past. Suddenly, he knelt in the void and looked at Qin Feiyang. He said, "Little brother, thank you for helping Tianyu. This old man has nothing to repay you with." "Old man, please get up. Fatso and I are brothers. It's only right for me to help him." Qin Feiyang quickly went forward and helped Situ Hai up. Situ Hai said, "It's Tianyu's blessing to have a brother like you." "Uncle Hai, what are you talking about? I'm not bad either, okay?" Fatso grumbled unhappily. Yes. You're not bad at all. Every descendant of the Situ family is a genius." Situ Hai laughed. "It's not as exaggerated as you say." Fatso scratched his head awkwardly. "Let's go. We'll go down and tell your father and mother this good news. They'll definitely be proud of you when they hear about it in the underworld." Situ Hai grabbed Fatso's hand and flew down. Fatso said, "Boss, wait for me." Qin Feiyang nodded. After Fatso and Situ Hai entered the cemetery, Qin Feiyang lowered his head and muttered. Wolf King asked curiously, "What are you thinking about?" Qin Feiyang said, "I feel that with our strength, it's not enough to avenge Fatso." "What do you mean?" Wolf King frowned. "Just like what Aunt Shui said, although the Yun State's mansion master isn't here, there are still the 10 great commanders, the precious treasure pavilion and the sacred palace's hall masters. For example, the Pill Hall's hall master. We've fought with him before. As a 3-star battle sect, he's extremely powerful. However, I'm not worried about these people. The person I'm worried about the most is the previous mansion master of the Yun State." Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice. Wolf King's pupils shrunk. The ugly old woman said that she was even more powerful than the old man. Then, the previous mansion master of the Yun State must be ridiculously powerful. If they alerted this person, not only would they not be able to avenge Fatso, but they would also be consigned to eternal damnation. Wolf King said, "Why don't we wait a little longer?" Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, "The arrow is already on the bow. We have to shoot it." After saying that, he took out the image crystal. "What are you doing?" Wolf King was suspicious. "Find someone to help us. With him around, it'll be hard for us to die," Qin Feiyang said with a smile. A strand of battle chi entered the image crystal. Soon a figure appeared. It was Lu Xingqian. Lu Xingqian asked with a smile, "Brother Qin, do you have any orders?" Qin Feiyang said, "There's something I'd like to ask you for help with." "What is it?" Lu Xingqian was puzzled. Qin Feiyang said, "Let's talk about it when you're here. I'm in the Yin State now." "What?" Lu Xingqian was dumbfounded. He said speechlessly, "You've just come back and you're already in the Yin State. You really can't stop. Give me the coordinates. I'll go there immediately." "Thank you." Qin Feiyang thanked him. After giving the coordinates to Lu Xingqian, he turned off the image crystal. At the same time, in the cemetery. "What? You came back this time to destroy the Xia, Yuan and He families?" Situ Hai looked at Fatso in shock. "Yes." Fatso nodded. His eyes flashed with a cold light. "You can't do that. You're not strong enough yet. You'll be courting death if you go there." Situ Hai said anxiously. Fatso smiled and comforted him. "Uncle Hai, don't worry. If I'm not confident, I won't do it." "No. Now that you've obtained the qualification to enter the imperial capital, your future is bright. I can't let you lose your life because of this. We'll definitely take revenge for this, but not now. Tianyu, listen to Uncle Hai's advice. Don't be stupid. There will be plenty of opportunities in the future." Situ Hai tried his best to persuade him. Now, Fatso was the only hope of the Situ family. So no matter what, he had to protect Fatso well. Fatso shook his head and said expressionlessly, I've made up my mind. Uncle Hai, don't try to persuade me. Then, he knelt in front of his parents' tombstones and said firmly, Father, Mother, all the clansmen, please rest assured. I'll definitely make those damned bastards pay with their blood. After that, Fatso suddenly got up and flew towards Qin Feiyang and Wolf King. Tianyu, listen to me, don't be impulsive. Situhai hurriedly chased after him. When Fatso flew in front of Qin Feiyang, he immediately said, Boss, we can go now. Qin Feiyang laughed. There's no rush. Let's wait for someone first. Who are we waiting for? Fatso was puzzled. Qin Feiyang said, Lu Xingqian. Him? Fatso frowned and said, Would he be so kind to help us? Who said I'm not that kind? In fact, I'm also a very loyal person. At this moment, a faint laugh sounded, and Lu Xingqian appeared out of thin air. He really came? Fatso was surprised. Lu Xingqian nodded to Qin Feiyang, then looked at Fatso and said, Don't you know that it's very immoral to speak ill of others behind their backs? About this, I apologize. Fatso laughed dryly. Lu Xingqian shook his head and laughed. At this time, Situhai caught up and said anxiously, Tianyu, you really can't go. Can you listen to me for once? Glancing at Situhai, Lu Xingqian looked at Qin Feiyang and frowned. What's the matter? Qin Feiyang briefly explained the situation. After listening, Lu Xingqian's face darkened. He glanced at the two men and the wolf, and said, This is not a child's play. Have you thought about it? Of course. Fatso nodded without hesitation. Lu Xingqian pondered for a moment and nodded. Okay, I'll help you. It's also a favor to Qin Feiyang. Although I've always disliked you, I really have to thank you this time. Fatso cupped his hands and said. Lu Xingqian waved his hand and smiled. It's no big deal. Let's go. Are you all crazy? Situhai said angrily. Uncle Hai, you can rest assured. We will definitely be able to get away safely. Fatso laughed. Situhai was extremely angry, but in the end he sighed and said, Fine, do as you wish, but you have to bring me along. Fatso frowned. Although I'm not strong enough, I've been paying attention to the movements of the three great families all these years. I know their background, and can definitely help you. Moreover, I also want to see the destruction of the three great families with my own eyes. Situhai said. This, Fatso looked at Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang thought for a moment and said with a smile, It's okay. If you want to go, go. Thank you, little brother. Situhai cupped his hands and thanked him, then took out a teleportation door and quickly opened it. Subsequently, you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.